Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Kakashi helps Naruto from villagers part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. When Kakashi wakes, it's to the dreadfully familiar, water-stained ceiling tiles of a hospital room. Even before he's fully conscious, he runs through basic self-diagnostic tests. No serious injuries, internal or otherwise, sore muscles and nausea rolling in his stomach. Chakra coils unburned and chakra reserves somewhat low but better than nothing, wrists and ankles restrained with chakra dampening chains, wearing nothing but a hospital-issued shirt and cotton pants, no weapons or gear in sight. And a tightness in his throat and burning in his eyes that he doesn't want to admit are a product of old nightmares. The smell of antiseptic stings his oversensitive nose and the bright whiteness of everything is eye-watering, but he manages not to panic and instead focuses outwards with more effort, relying less on sharpened instincts and ingrained reflexes to assess his surroundings. The hustle and bustle of a big city are background noise to the heartbeats and footsteps that periodically pass by his hospital door. A glance outside and a whiff of fresh air streaming from a crack in the window tell him enough that he is in Konoha, or a very good genjutsu of one. He's still testing the room with subtle spikes of chakra, and on a higher floor of the main shinobi hospital in the heart of the village. He ignores the strange, lingering scent of incense and salt water and spice, can't let himself fall into a trap because it smells suspiciously familiar and like something that will break him if he tries to figure it out. But he already knows, he's not one of the best trackers in the nations for nothing after all, and he's also the best at denial, so guess which one he chooses to be better at now, and so he ignores it. Deems it unimportant but always in the back of his mind. The restraints are easy to slip out of, ridiculously so his mind tells him suspiciously, and so is detecting the almost not there wisps of not chakra but presence he can sense in the outermost reaches of his senses. ANBU, this is a test, it's always a test, but for now he will not answer for what, and comprehension dawns on him when he nears the exit. Seals, well done seals by the looks of them, subtly framing the door, and probably window, and etched faintly into the wood with chakra. He doesn't dare prod at them in fear of invoking most likely debilitating consequences, especially if they were made by the person he thinks they were. Years of sporadically taking an interest in Jiraiya's seals and then nearly a decade of riding Minato's coattails have taught him this lesson well. Fortunately, Kakashi has a way around that beneath the eye patch the hospital had so thoughtfully provided him. A quick kamui and missing door later and he casually slithers away from his prison to a place he can breathe without the deep-seated ache making his muscles tremble, somewhere he could think without a strange fog clouding his mind while another Kakashi lays in his place, solid but as fake and fragile as he feels. He supposes he could just leave now and give himself a better chance of escaping undetected, but he has important things that have hopefully not been taken to Hokage Tower. He finds the supply closet used for medical staff to change quickly if they are called to the field and swipes a standard uniform. Finds his own things in a locked, sealed, and guarded room in a hidden section of the building. But he's been playing this game for too long, knows this hospital too well, and isn't that just sad that this hospital genjutsu hallucination knows how many times he's been here, how long he's stayed in these rooms and wandered these halls for one reason or another, and meanders the streets with a low-level but effective genjutsu weaving the image of a brown-haired, brown-eyed man in his place. He doesn't stop to wave at Asuma. He doesn't stop to gaze at the Hokage monument, or the four faces carved into it. He doesn't stop to wonder why there are so many Uchihas wandering the districts of Konoha. He doesn't stop to listen to a small family of 3 with ridiculous hair yelling at each other in a small ramen stand. He doesn't stop to watch a black-haired man with orange goggles get scolded by a petite brunette with purple marks on her cheeks. He doesn't stop. He doesn't stop. He doesn't. He stops at the memorial stone. It's no bigger or smaller than he remembers, and he does remember. He will always remember, just as glossy and well-kept in his memories with wilted flowers and crumbling ashes at the base, but the names are different. A different order in some cases, new names he hasn't carved into his memory and names that haven't yet been carved into stone. The henge fades within the hour, more from lack of care than lack of focus, and 10 minutes later the bushin disappears as well. The resulting, panic spikes of chakra would be amusing if he wasn't sure whether the joke would end in grudging laughter or public execution. It only takes 10 minutes after to feel 3 presences quickly coming his way, intent and strong and alive, and Kakashi has always wanted to apologize to his ghosts, but right now it seems impossible. One gets there first and not a few moments later the other 2 join, and the 3 land on the edges of the training ground, of their old training ground. Kakashi can't tear his eyes away from the memorial however, has always found resolve and guilt in equal measure etched into the stone, but the strength he draws from those feelings fails him now. His nose itches with the long dead sense of incense, salt water, and spice, but he still doesn't look back until a choked Kakashi? He closes his uncovered eye, takes a deep breath, and turns. 3 ghosts stare back. Kakashi has imagined this moment hundreds, realistically thousands, of times, but for some reason it doesn't occur to him that he's never imagined apologizing to them when they look older. He has the Sharingan, and with the blessing curse he is always able to recall their young faces perfectly, even in death, And now it's like he doesn't know what to do when looking at them as they should have been if he hadn't been so. They're still staring. Aito is taller, Kakashi notes, with a slight edge of hysteria in his thoughts. But not as tall as Kakashi. Why wouldn't he be though? In this world, it seems, Aito lives and grows and becomes the young man Kakashi never gave him the chance to be. Rin too. She barely comes up to Obito's shoulder but is still a head taller than in her youth, and he can't stop staring at the blood staining their clothes and faces, the same blood he's never been able to wash from his hands. Minato-sensei is almost exactly the same as Kakashi remembers except he's breathing. There are lines around his eyes and mouth, extremely faint but present and a result of years of laughter and sorrow Kakashi would never be able to experience at his side. He wonders what they see. A failure, a shadow, a long-forgotten memory? You bastard, don't ignore me! Obito shouts, voice cracking with the threat of tears, and the familiar words bring Kakashi back from the sinking depths of his mind just like it always used to before. The words leave his mouth without much thought, a knee-jerk reaction he hasn't had in over 10 years. Why should I listen to a crybaby ninja? The silence that follows is heavy with anticipation and shock until in a flash there are two bodies colliding into him, sending him to the ground in a pained heap of silent tears and ugly crying, but he won't say his body is still healing because this is the kind of healing he needs even if he will never say out loud. There's dust in his eyes, yes, even the covered one, but the Sharingan has always acted up at random times and this is no different, and his chest feels tight with more than just exhaustion, and he doesn't think he's ever felt better, crushed under the bodies of his two precious teammates, minutes stretching as they struggle to control themselves. Another flash, this time yellow, stands over him, bright blue eyes glassy as if the skies were about to rain, and Kakashi doesn't imagine how rough his sensei's voice sounds. Obito, Rin, let him up. The two are reluctant, and Kakashi also didn't realize how heavy they would be when they grew out of their child bodies, the ones he buried, one casket empty and one casket too light to contain all of one person. Then later, much later, one casket too heavy for him to lower himself, but the thought vanishes as soon as Kakashi reaches out to take his sensei's outstretched hand. In no time, he's pulled into strong arms that taught him, lead him, comforted him for years and years before he learned how to accept it. The hug is crushing but short, not giving Kakashi much time to marvel at the fact that his chin easily hooks over his sensei's shoulder now when at one time he thought those shoulders were taller than the Hokage monument. Even though Minato pulls back first, his hands are like hot iron brands on Kakashi's shoulders as his sensei's bright blue eyes roam over his masked face like he can't believe what he's seeing. Kakashi knows the feeling. When they brought you in, I didn't think Minato looks lost, so much like the teenage jounin unprepared to take a grieving, genius orphan under his wing, and Kakashi knows this is his fault too. I was so sure they'd be wrong. But Tsunade-sama and Hayashi-san swore that you were real, alive, not some fucked up attempt at recreating the Hatake line. You, and Jiraiya-sensei and Kushina and I checked the scroll and even had Fugaku-san look it over with his Sharingan, and it's real and breathed sensei. You're starting to sound like Obito when he's panicking, Kakashi blandly states, enjoying Minato's sharp, startled laugh. Looking so surprised and pleased it makes Kakashi want to preen, especially with Obito's spluttering and Rin's giggling right beside him. Minato's still smiling, and it looks a little like grieving, but it's not like Kakashi can judge, at him, rueful this time. I should have known you wouldn't stay put in the hospital until we could visit. Obito elbows his way into his like of vision, and for a moment Kakashi sees double, one Obito bloody and young and one not before his sight rights itself, and there's just one Uchiha in front of him. Yeah, you bastard. You were out for 3 days. Rin was taking care of you the whole time and hurt her neck sleeping in the chair next to you. Kakashi expects Rin to blush and deny it, but she does neither, instead eyeing Obito with a sly smile he doesn't remember her ever wearing. Are you sure that was me, Obito? I don't snore, and I remember the nurses complaining that the other patients had a hard time sleeping with all the noise in Kakashi's room. I don't know what you're talking about. Obito gapes at her before turning back to Kakashi, eyes still suspiciously watery while a flush worked its way up his neck, so visible with his pale skin. I didn't. That. They continue to snipe at each other teasingly, Minato watching all three of them with an indulgent fondness that Kakashi misses. But the short interaction leaves him feeling off balance. Of course. Of course they would grow up. Of course they would stay together. Of course they would change. His eyes are quick and assessing as he looks at his three teammates again, this time with more life-hardened scrutiny and less rose-colored remembrance, and feels something like the child of loss and envy curl in his chest at the closeness his team shares now without him. Minato is still a fearsome Hokage with Obito and Rin as competent jounin under him, but they are still a team. Kakashi remembers how doggedly Minato had shadowed him after everything, watched over him even with his own grief at losing one then two students, determined not to lose a third. So Kakashi knows the same must have occurred in this world as well. This time, though, Rin hadn't been abducted and killed by her remaining teammate, and Sensei didn't die on the night of his child's birth, and their bonds are tighter than he could have imagined. It's a bit jarring, a bit heartbreaking, but he's never been one for dwelling on negative emotions, rarely felt spite and even rarer resentment. His companions are grief and guilt, and those two take up too much of his time for other things like anger or jealousy to really take root, until recently, until he was assigned a team of 3 that would change his world, and even now those negative, ugly things don't manifest. Despite not living this life with them, Kakashi is above all thankful that they are more or less happy and together. How did you get out of your room, anyhow? Minato asks, head tilting curiously to the side, and something in Kakashi aches to see so much of his student in his sensei. I placed seals on every surface so you wouldn't be able to leave. I didn't want you completely restrained in the bowels of the TNI department, so it was the only way to convince the council you'd be secure. Who, by the way, are going to have my head because of your little stunt. Ugh, the council. Rin rolls her eyes in obvious contempt, and Kakashi is gratified to find he can read her thoughts easily. Aito snorts, you think even your seals could keep Kakashi in the hospital? The same Kakashi that snuck out of there with a broken arm and a fever so high we was actually nice to me at training? Minato almost pouts and Kakashi despairs at the completely un-Hokage-like expression. I put seals everywhere though. And I still want to know what you did with the doorframe, Kashi. Tsunade doesn't like having her hospital damaged like that. His smile turns a little devious when Rin whaps a cackling Aito on the back of the head with a wide grin of her own. So like Naruto and Sakura in that moment, Kakashi can't help but feel warm at the sight even as it causes him pain in equal measure. He taps his highlight, slanted over his scarred eye. I have a few tricks. The air changes, and the 3 Jounin can pinpoint the moment they're bright like the sun. Sensei becomes the Fleon-sight Yondaime Hokage. Minato's face is almost grave when he looks at Kakashi, and the stinging in his left eye already tells him what this is going to be about. Kakashi, while we were able to prove that you're you, just from a different place, we couldn't explain why you have the Sharingan. Aito and Rin say nothing, expressions dropping from their elated teasing to something more professional but not quite, and Kakashi looks back at the memorial stone he spent his life apologizing to. He sighs, a sound that feels as heavy as it sounds, and gestures for them to sit in the green grass of their old training grounds. Get comfortable. I have a long story to tell. Again, it's as easy as talking to the memorial stone. As he speaks, they stay quiet, as silent as the grave behind him, but unlike the memorial stone, they watch him with rapt attention. Here, he can't lie, can't bring himself to weave half-truths and embellish tales when these 3 deserve all the honesty he can muster, no matter how much everything he's learned has taught him to do the opposite. The story is longer, too, much longer than any other he's told to their headstones, and so it comes out as a story, a sad, tragic story that has no business being spoken aloud. And as familiar as his apologies are, this time he feels raw when he finishes, like someone took a rusted kunai and roughly cut him open, scraping everything out in slow drags. His teammates look no better. Aito had gotten sick exactly twice and Rin wouldn't stop crying halfway through. He doesn't remember Minato ever looking so pale. He doesn't tell them everything, of course. They more know of his past, his father, they know everything up to the events of the Canopy Bridge where their paths diverge. Here, he is the empty casket because it was him that pushed Aito out of the way of the boulder, his lower body crushed and bleeding out slowly in front of them, slipping away even as Rin pushed herself to exhaustion trying to keep him awake, keep him alive despite the fact that in the end it was he who was left to rot behind enemy lines, and how he wasn't there when Rin was abducted because he'd been on trial as a thief and murderer, accused of treason, of being exactly like his father. He tells them exactly how his Mangekyo Sharingan matches Abito's perfectly, low tenor never wavering despite the cracks he can feel spreading in his chest. But he's not given a chance to apologize and beg for forgiveness because Rin throws herself at him in a fierce, bone-crushing hug that leaves him breathless. He tries to calm her teary, hysterical I'm so sorry Kakashi-kun because she has no reason to be sorry, so why is she apologizing when he is the murderer? But he's never been able to comfort others, has always been one to stay quiet in the face of sorrow, so he just holds her until she stops shaking, until Abito's pale face cracks with an absolving smile, until Minato bows his head in silent prayer. He tells them of his years in A&B where he became less than human, a broken tool that cracked and chipped at every heart he'd crushed, a broken tool that nearly shattered at the death of the Yondaime and his wife. How he'd nearly gone down a dark path with no intention to return, mind poisoned with silky words and warped with promises of justice for his teacher before the Sandaime saved him, from himself and from following a one-eyed thief into the bleak underground. He keeps going despite the tightness in his throat until they know of the possible threat to the Jinchuriki, the potential identities of the Akatsuki, the greatest war the 5 nations will ever know. The grief on their faces is terrible, so terrible, and Kakashi wishes they'd never asked. There's more, so much more, but he doesn't mention the Kyuubi's attack or the Uchiha massacre or Madara because it seems they hadn't interfered just yet, doesn't refer to his 3 students as anything but nameless graduates that happened to pass the Bell test. He doesn't have the patience, yes he does, to repeat himself in case they are a threat, needs to wait, and wait because he's good at biding his time for an opportunity to present itself and tell the right people at the right time. After all, who can he truly trust in this upside-down world? Maybe Orochimaru wasn't the only snake poisoning Konoha. In return, he learns that they were able to complete the mission, just like in his world, except Team Minato returns as heroes. And why wouldn't they? This time, there was no disgraced Hatake runt carrying the most prized Jujutsu of the famed Uchiha clan, no questions of theft, no doubts of Minato's abilities as a teacher let alone Hokage. No Kakashi. In this world, Obito becomes a Kenjutsu master because right before he died, Kakashi had given him his father's tanto, had asked him to become a hero like the White Fang and protect his precious people, and Kakashi feels the pang in his chest seeing his father's weapon so well loved and cared for on Obito's back. He remembers feeling it shatter in his hands like his father's legacy, all in the name retribution that didn't satisfy the rage or quench the sorrow. In this world, Rin is scarred by her inability to save her teammate, so she seeks out the greatest healers known and learns as much as she can, determined to never let it happen again. And once more Kakashi is humbled by the sight of the small medipack she'd given him as a jounin present hooked to her hip. Fate is cruel. She knows how what his blood feels like soaking her clothes, and he knows what her beating heart feels like in his hand. In this world, Minato vows to keep his remaining teammates alive, throws everything he has into his ceiling, convinced he would have been able to save his first student if he'd been faster, better, smarter, and becomes even more infamous in the art of Fuinjutsu than Jiraiya or the Uzumaki clan with Kushina supporting him through everything. And Kakashi wonders how much support he needed after losing his first and longest student, his brother in arms and son at heart. Later, when the war draws to an end, Minato is named Hokage by unanimous approval of the entire village. Obito rises to fame as one of the most powerful Uchiha seen in his generation with an activated Mangekyo Sharingan, and Rin's name is spoken across the shinobi nations as a miracle healer that will someday soon surpass her mentors. The village hidden in the leaves is at its peak. Konoha's Yondaime Hokage is young and legendary, supported by his devastating whirlwind of a wife and his son's godfather, Jiraiya. He is backed by two powerful students whose names are known across the lands, and the charisma of the Namikaze Uzumaki family are enough to cement the loyalty of all the clans in the village, even somewhat taming the hostility that brests between the Uchiha and their naysayers. Tentative peace reigns as the Hokage extends treaties of ceasefires to the 5 nations and beyond, starting with the Sand, and the Sandaime Kazekage accepts the Yondaime's olive branch with their alliance succeeding mostly due to their sons who will someday outshine even them. Kakashi, for the first time since waking up, wonders if he is still dreaming. I never got you a gift. Obito interrupts sheepishly, a bit sadly, as if it was a confession more than an admission. Kakashi waves it off but Sharingan burning in his skull disagrees. A gift, a curse, details it croons. Actually, Rin interrupts, eyes shining with pride as she looks to Obito, and Kakashi doesn't imagine the something else there. After what happened, after the war, Obito made sure the Hatake name was brought back to its former glory. Minato nods, ignoring Obito's protests that it wasn't only him to do it. He was adamant that your sacrifice was not in vain and that you and your father were to be regaled as heroes for saving your comrades. After Obito activated all the stages of the Sharingan and helped on the front lines using your tanto, the Uchiha clan couldn't exactly disparage your name for saving one of their most talented Dijutsu wielders twice. He smiles proudly at Rin next, and Rin made a name for herself as a field medic towards the end, so with her influence as a shinobi capable in both healing and combat, I was able to sway the council's verdict on every team having a competent healer like Tsunade-sama suggested, and the decreased number of deaths have made it a requirement for any team to pass as Chunin. The lower death toll gave her opinion more weight during meetings, and she pointed out that if your father's team had had a proper medic, the mission wouldn't have gone so poorly. Rin rolls her eyes but blushes anyway, touched by the Yondaime's words, adding, and the fact that you were a genius and the Yondaime's best student certainly helped. You should have seen how scary Minato-sensei got when someone said anything bad about you or your father. So yeah, Obito summarizes, humble and proud at once, since I never got you anything, I figured you at least deserved to be remembered for the good things you did, and I always admired your dad, so. Kakashi doesn't know what to say. He's always lived under his father's name, both good and bad, hasn't learned to live any other way, and only his own growing reputation has allowed him to be recognized for more than his father's title or his mistakes. To know that, at least in one world, his team had gone so far to clear the Hatake name, that his father is finally being honored for being the hero that he was and could rest in peace without waiting for his angry, bitter son to forgive him, he was speechless. His voice is rough when he says with all the sincerity in the world, thank you. 3 beaming smiles is his reply. This Kakashi, Rin realizes one day, watching her boys play in the dirt like children instead of sparring like shinobi, is unbearably kind. Her heart shatters at the thought. To be fair, she hadn't known their Kakashi long enough to truly know him inside and out. After all, they were only classmates for a short time, teammates for not much longer, and she and Obito had been blinded to his character for different reasons for so long. So how can she know what their Kakashi was truly like? But she did know and knows with all her heart that their Kakashi was a broken boy. Their Kakashi was riddled with cracks she could never seal, held up and hardened by his own pride and wrapped in armor made of a cold, belittling indifference that never settled well on his young shoulders. Their Kakashi could be nice, when it suited him. He could be thoughtful when it came to the people close to him. Their Kakashi could be anyone he needed to be: a quiet neighbor, a good student, a reliable comrade, an incredible shinobi. But when he was stripped of expectations and scorn, he was just Kakashi, and for all that he was their precious teammate, he was not kind. Maybe he could have been, one day, with Obito and Rin and Minato by his side to melt the ice around his heart and pull his head out of his bitter grief. But that's neither here nor there anymore. Their Kakashi is dead, and seeing this Kakashi, just as broken but so different, gently guiding an academy student's hand in Akato as Aito rolls in the grass with a few others. Minato watching fondly in the background with children grabbing at the fringes of his flame-edged coat only reminds her of that fact. She has to remind herself of it every once in a while, because the wistful notion of "I want to keep him" is a dangerous one. She is a strong woman and an even stronger shinobi. She can handle heartbreak, as many times as necessary, but she doesn't think she can handle Aito or Minato's a second time. She doesn't say a word about how this Kakashi's smile comes so freely, as hidden as it is behind his mask, or how it's as foreign to her as his easy attitude, because nothing with their Kakashi was ever easy. She doesn't mention his longing looks when she catches his eyes lingering on them, watching them with a profound sadness that Rin can feel pangs sympathetically in her chest, as if they are everything he could ever ask for. She doesn't tell him that when he speaks, she's reminded of someone far older, and she doesn't wonder out loud just what this Kakashi has had to survive to become so wise. Instead, she does what she's always done: look after her boys and patch up their scrapes when they stumble. Scold them for recklessness and love them for it at the same time. Watch over them as they protect her in return. It's all she can do when she knows, just like she knew all those years ago with his blood running like rivers through her fingers, that they can't keep Kakashi. They are all powerful, they are all great, they are all meant for incredible things, but Kakashi's fate is far darker and far crueler in this life and in any other. He's meant to do more than fix their broken team, something in her whispers, meant for something bigger and beyond even his father's long legacy, meant to outgrow them into something absolutely incredible and unreachable. He belongs to no one, no matter how much she or Aito or Minato wishes differently. She thinks of this team, this Aito, laughing louder and longer than she can remember, this Minato, looking younger than he has in years, this Rin, thinking of him so fondly when for so long it was too hard to think of him at all. She thinks of Kakashi, of how he will never be buried in the village he protected so fiercely. She thinks of another Aito, crushed to death with a missing eye and a smile on his face, another Minato, powerless and cold beside his wife and child, another Rin, stabbed through the heart by the broken boy she thought she loved. She thinks of Kakashi, all alone, grieving and grieving and grieving. She thinks of his new team, who took the broken pieces of his shattered life and create a mosaic of someone so much happier. She thinks of all these things, all these people she will never know and never be, and doesn't stop the tears from spilling down her face because there's one truth that will always remain. In any world, it seems, Kakashi isn't theirs to keep. It's a nice day, Kakashi thinks lazily, looking up to the blue sky and drifting clouds. The sounds of his teammates chatting nearby is a soothing balm that helps ease the ache that's always lived beneath his ribs, there but never healed. They leave him to his thoughts. Don't attempt to draw him into another conversation so soon, not after so many revelations in such a short amount of time. Their understanding and consideration is more than he deserves, but he enjoys it anyway, minutes and hours slipping by as the sun sinks slowly into the horizon. He idly wonders how many responsibilities his teammates, and especially his sensei, are shirking just to sit quietly beside him, is counting the number of rules they're all breaking, but he is thankful all the same. It gives him time to think, to process, the things not learned from his team but rather from his short side trip before he was found. A shinobi without information is a dead one, after all, and he is too good to keep himself from perusing through some of the Hokage's restricted files while a second and third Bushin slip into the library to brush up on Konoha's recent history in the short time between his jailbreak and his discovery at the stone. All the things his team told him matched up to his Bushin's memories, of course, a few details missing that they don't know are important, and a few more added that would never be written in books, forever lost to the ages and carried far away on whispered winds. Kakashi can feel that not all is well in this world, even if the three of his most precious people are sitting in front of him. Even as they chat amongst themselves, content to have him near, something wrong crawls across Kakashi's skin, makes his instincts bristle and itch with restlessness. There is tension in the village, among the citizens and the shinobi, even if they don't realize it. Kakashi thinks he knows what they're waiting for. But first, the wind stirs gently and Kakashi doesn't need to open his eyes to know ANBU has arrived to collect them. Skirting the edges of his senses for the last few hours that had his teeth on edge. But he's glad to see for himself Yugao doing well behind her feline mask, even if she will never know him as more than a dead man. Hokage-sama, the council has requested your presence with Itachi Kakashi. Her even tone nearly brings a reminiscent smile to his face when he remembers her eagerness to be on his team what seemed to be a lifetime ago. But the memory of her silent tears at her lover's funeral is sudden and sobering. Aito and Rin notice the shift in his mood and tense beside him, while Minato is as still as calm waters, observant and quiet. His teacher doesn't sigh as he stands and absently dusts his clothes off, looking regal and powerful even with such simple movements. But it's not hard to see how reluctant Minato is to move and break the tentative peace they've found. Seems we've avoided this for long enough. Aito, Rin, he looks at them expectantly, eyebrow raised and mouth in a grin as if he knows exactly what they're planning with almost imperceivable forced cheer. No eavesdropping. If you have to, you can go bother Kushina until we return. I'm sure she'd love the company and an update. Kakashi stands as well, shaking off the melancholy that seems to cling to every thought and easily hiding the exhaustion racking his body even as Rin eyes him suspiciously and Obito relaxes enough to pout at their exasperated Hokage. He reassures, I'm fine, Rin. I'm just going to stand in a corner while a few politicians talk about me like I'm not there. It's enough to leech away the remaining tension in Rin's shoulders, but Obito's not-so-subtle snickering draws a narrow-eyed glare from him. Minato's secretive smile is enough to raise his hackles a bit as well, but he shrugs it off and follows his teacher, traveling farther and farther away from their old training grounds and pretending it isn't hard to leave his two former teammates behind. He doesn't look at the smooth, porcelain face of his once subordinate again, takes a moment to rein in the turmoil and guilt swimming in his gut. But it's hard. He was the one to introduce her to hate. No wonder Obito looked so smug. Kakashi doesn't really know what to expect at the council meeting aside from the usual huffing and puffing from the older members and disinterest or belligerence from the younger. But he is unprepared to face most of his age mates on top of all of Konoha's clan heads and Minato's advisors how they managed to get Tsunade to step foot into the village barring Naruto winning a bet against her again. He can only guess a certain redhead had a hand in it. There are easily several dozen shinobi stuffed into the large but claustrophobic room. And it's not a mistake that most of the Jounin are stationed around the perimeter with ANBU shadowing them while Kakashi is left to face every pair of eyes staring beadily into him. Well, at least he isn't being underestimated. His shoulder twitches, a small movement largely overlooked, and carefully spots 3 root agents among the stationed shinobi. He doesn't react, however, far too used to power plays and politics and mind games like these to let it affect him, especially Danzo's, who stares at him unflinchingly from his perch, and merely enjoys the wide-eyed stares and hushed whispers of his comrades below the humdrum of careless civilians making noise outside the tower. As quiet and discreet as they try to be, as they are in normal circumstances, Kakashi's sensitive ears can easily pick up the words passing between downturned lips. Spitting image of the white fang. Don't believe a word of it, it's completely ridiculous. Didn't think it was true. Possible. It's an illusion or a clever trick, surely. Definitely didn't drink enough before this. Minato rises from his seat, long white and red cloak fluttering with the movement, and Kakashi's chest swells with pride at how an almost reverent hush falls over most of the attendees immediately. His teacher's presence fills the room, as does his warm voice. The council has requested a meeting with everyone here today to clarify the series of events that took place 3 days ago. Kakashi would have been surprised to see Guy, Ebisu, and Enko step up to explain their mission and how they found and brought Kakashi back to Konoha, but he's already read the file and knows the events that took place. Found unconscious just outside the Land of Fire's borders, carrying nothing but his gear with no signs of combat in the area, it was Guy who confirmed his identity, and at any age, the startling resemblance to the long-dead White Fan would never change, and it was him who managed to convince his teammates to bring Kakashi back to the village bound but alive. It seems, no matter where he is, his old friend saves him again and again. He tunes out most of Ebisu's droning voice, mind wandering back to what Minato had told him before getting to the tower. I take it the council has been kept up to date on my status? Kakashi asks blandly, not at all looking forward to seeing that old crow Danzo or his 2 cohorts, Koharu and Hamura. Those 2 had been bad enough even with Sarutobi curbing the worst of their prejudices. Kakashi doesn't want to think what they'll say now without their former teammate to settle them. Minato nods. For the most part, they understand the gist of the situation, but it was still a bit of a political nightmare the first day. Kakashi raises an eyebrow. Oh? Minato shrugs, shooting a distracted smile at some civilians and waving to a few shopkeepers that managed to catch a glimpse of them moving swiftly across the rooftops. For a while, no one knew what to do. A Konohan prodigy who died on a mission that essentially ended the Third Shinobi World War suddenly turning up 16 years later as if he hadn't actually been dead all this time? So we ran all the tests we could. A biopsy was done on the Sharingan you have and matched to Obito's DNA, and everything down to the last hair matched your records. Tsunadeheim did all the examinations herself. Hayashi-san and Fugaka-san confirmed that there was no genjutsu and that your appearance wasn't some obscure body transformation Keki-Eigenkai, so that ruled out most subterfuge theories. He winced. Inoichi-san and Ibiki-san did try to go through your head, which might explain your headache waking up. Sorry about that by the way, and even though they couldn't get much with you unconscious, they agreed you weren't a threat. Yet, so they accepted the explanation that I'm, from a different world. It had taken Kakashi quite a bit of time to come to the conclusion himself, but rationality and pragmatism has never led him astray. What was the saying? If you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Besides, he's seen stranger things. Minato looks as doubtful as he feels, not so much accepted as too curious for their own good. It's a miracle they even agreed to this, even if it's just to see and hear for themselves. He doesn't have to strain to hear the stress in Minato's voice. How could he not when he knows, under normal circumstances, he should have been killed or detained in Tianai's basement if not outright by Hokage's orders, then at least by the combined pressures of the council and the clans. How hard had Minato fought in his defense to give him this chance? Kakashi doesn't want to ask if his sensei has considered Orochimaru's experiments, not yet. Instead, he glances at the blonde questioningly. And you didn't wonder if I had just survived the rock slide? Of course I did. Old hurt and even older sorrow darts across his teacher's expression, and it's just another reason why Kakashi hates himself. His teacher's expression clears, but Kakashi's guilt does not. However, there were no signs of trauma due to a severe injury like the one that Kuroham, like the one Rin described, so survival was ruled out. Kakashi steers away from the topic with all the grace of Sai's typical social ability. So a big interrogation is what they decided? Nosy old codgers. Minato barks a laugh and gives him a wry grin. You know how the council likes to know everything. Unfortunately, Ebisu's flowery words come to an end and the spotlight is back on him. Minato nods, turning to address him and the rest of the room. He is stern but not unkind when he instructs. The council and clan heads have questions that they would like to have addressed, and anyone may ask as long as it is relevant, appropriate, and respectful. Yamanaka and Noichi-san and Marino Ibiki-san, heads in the torture and interrogation department, will be scanning your vitals and monitoring your mental state as you speak to ensure we only hear the truth. Do you agree to these conditions? Kakashi's voice is just as solemn as he nods. I do. Do you remember what happened to you? How you got here? It's obvious by here his sensei meant this Konoha. Unfortunately, Kakashi doesn't, and it's disconcerting but useful. I have no recollection of the events that lead up to my discovery, is all he says, because it's true, and despite the suspicious disbelief that colors some of their faces, the lack of Inoichi nor Ibiki-san's disagreement tells them enough. He is telling the truth. He's sure he'll be seeing those two soon, though. Privately, Minato nods, expecting that answer and continues, please state your name and rank. Hatake Kakashi, Jounin, registration identification number, 009720, ages of promotion, Genin at 5, Chunin at 6, Jounin at 14. Minato raises an eyebrow. Technically, sensei, it's not really a promotion. Minato looks uncompromising but Kakashi can see him fighting a smile at the cheek. Kakashi relents with a sigh, ANBU at 14, and ANBU captain at 16. It is largely quiet up to this point, but with the revelation of his career in ANBU, the whispers kick up again. To his comrades' credit, none of his former classmates look all that surprised, half probably expecting it, and half too busy staring at him like a ghost. Kakashi expects questions from the clan heads with Minato's allowance, but he is a bit surprised when Inuzuka-tsum, a fierce woman whom he's worked with but never talked to at length, speaks up. How long were you in ANBU, kid? Kakashi's eyebrow twitches at that last bit but answers nonetheless. 10 years. The whispers rise and fall once more, and this time there is more incredulity, even in Minato's expression. Because while Kakashi told him he'd been in ANBU, he hadn't said a word about why or for how long. A year in ANBU is considered average, 3 years a long career, and very few making it past 5 years. A decade of service is an almost guaranteed death sentence, both in body and mind, especially at such a young age no matter how quickly he rose through the ranks as a child. Kakashi knows they'll start evaluating his mental state with vigor once this wretched meeting is adjourned just by the small frown now creasing in Noichi's face and the spark of something ominous in Ibiki's eyes. It doesn't matter though. He's been through plenty of interrogations, he's suffered more torture that he likes to remember. He will only tell them what they need to know. He's drawn back to his sensei who looks the slightest bit worried, but only to those who know him best, and is somewhat caught off guard to see several of the non-skeptical shinobi looking at him in awe and admiration, while others frown with contempt and wariness. Ah, he thinks, I see despite Obito's attempts at clearing my family name, there are those who still blame my father and I for the war. It isn't a surprising thought, just a sad one. The revelation reminder of his genius doesn't seem to settle well with some. But Kakashi is prepared. After all, it's only through his own rising fame that he was able to finally restore the Hatake clan, even if it is now a clan of one. While inconvenient on some levels, he knows he used this anonymity for his own purposes, less eyes watching Sharingan no Kakashi for his triumphs and failures. Well, he amends, Jiraiya's gaze like a physical weight on his chest, probably. Come ANBU commander? Kakashi is only able to catch the tail end of Hayashi's question, but thankfully the man continues. As regal and cold as Kakashi remembers before the disastrous Chunin exams, 10 years is commendable record. Why not reach higher? Despite sounding like a compliment to his skills, Kakashi can hear the suspicion beneath the well-spoken questions. Kakashi's voice is cool and expression blank. That is precisely why Hokage-sama honorably discharged me. As you pointed out, Hyuga-sama, 10 years is a long time in ANBU, especially added to a decade of service as a Chunin and Jounin. As we were in times of peace and knowing I have no interest in power, administrative or otherwise, he believed my skills could be used elsewhere, and so I became a teacher like Minato-sensei. That seems to quell some of the wariness coloring their expressions, and Uchiha Fugaku looks near delighted at someone talking back to the Hyuga head, even as discreet as it is. You dare question me, who gave 25 years of service to this village and died protecting my teammates? You dare question the Hokage, his judgment of my worth, his decisions? But Kakashi knows the questions aren't over. This time, the question comes from a minor clan Kakashi can't even name. How many missions have you completed? More than you're qualified to know. Kakashi inwardly sighs. With the direction these questions are going, this meeting is going to take a while. I've completed 1,141 official missions. 197 D rank, 190 crank, 414 B rank, 298 A rank, and 42 S rank. Another one pipes up. Official? Kakashi shrugs. I may have completed a few missions not necessarily sanctioned by the Hokage. It all turned out okay in the end, so mission success. Now there are disbelieving looks being leveled at him by his fellow jounin, some in distaste because of his attitude and most because they are trying to reconcile the man he's become with the child that he was. It's hard to remember what he was like before, mainly because he tries to forget, but everyone here has some memory of him rigid, intelligent, and bitter beyond words. Seeing him now must be a shock, flippant and everything they think he is not. Dead silence meets his declaration and only stretches when neither Yamanaka nor Ibiki say a word to contradict him, and he catches the way Minato tries to hide his amusement. And whistle shatters the suffocating quiet by up till now silent Toad Sage, and thankfully all eyes turn to him. Not bad, kid. Almost as good as me, the great Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya bellows, laughing obnoxiously, only to have his head slammed against the tabletop by an irate Tsunade with surrounding clan heads barely concealing their disapproval or amusement. But it does the trick and disperses the mounting tension just like Jiraiya probably intended. It's a familiar scene that catches him off guard with how nostalgic it is, the mix of recognizing his students and their masters and seeing the great Sannin so lively again. While Naruto had been closer to the sage, Jiraiya had once been a good friend of Tsukumo's and little Kakashi's annoying uncle, too. The sentimental thought quickly passes when he notices the curious and deadly gleams in several eyes he can see. He's in for a long night. When he'd seen that familiar silver hair on an unfamiliar figure in front of the memorial stone, Aito honestly hadn't known what to think. It had seemed so impossible at the time, even after being the first one at the hospital when Minato's message reached him, even after seeing Guy's haunted expression and Kushina's pinched face, even after staring at the unconscious man with wide eyes and building rage for hours on end. It's a trick, a spy, it's not him. Even after every theory was shot down and the impossible became more and more likely, not a trick, not a spy. Still not him. It can't be him, Aito had thought furiously, eyes pricking with the embarrassing sting of tears he hadn't felt in ages because he had better control than that. It couldn't be him because he'd been dead for 16 years and it was Abito's fault, and is this his punishment for failing so miserably? He almost hadn't recognized Rin when he'd seen her at the hospital, talking with Tsunade and looking so much like the heartbroken girl he'd been in love with in their teen years. Strong, beautiful, kind-hearted Rin, reduced to muffled sobs at the imposter's bedside late into the night when she thought no one was watching over her. Because for all that Rin was grounded in reality while he was the one to fly off into dreams, she had hopes and wishes and regrets too, and seeing one of her greatest ones in front of her had seemed to be too much. He'd wanted to hope too. He'd wanted to hope. But as much as he'd wanted to believe recklessly as he's wont to do, Uchiha blood still ran hotly through his veins and the insistent burn of suspicion hadn't left him. Whoever this man was, Aito had quietly promised he would make sure the other understood true agony for inflicting this pain on the people he loved. In front of Rin, he'd put on a grin. In front of Minato, he'd held his head high. At the fake's bedside he'd sat on his hands and tried not to kill him on the spot. How dare you? So it had been as much a surprise to him as it was to the ghostly specter of the late last Itachi when the choked name, Kakashi, fell from his lips, rage fleeing from him in a dizzying rush that left him terrifyingly vulnerable in the silence that stretched between them. He'd nearly clutched his chest to keep his heart from beating too loudly in his ribcage because it had seemed one word, one sound could make the other disappear into the dying sunlight like he was never actually there. And then, miracle of miracles, the man had turned, still solid and real and not fading with accusations in his eyes like Aito always remembered from his nightmares. In that moment, Aito hadn't been able to breathe even as the words had tumbled from his mouth in an angry, heated rush that had ended up cracking pathetically halfway through. You bastard, don't ignore me. A pause, and something had loosened its grip in Abito's chest when he'd heard the low, mocking drawl, why should I listen to a crybaby ninja? Everything after had become a blur, literally, as he and Rin had tumbled into the solid, real, warm, not fake body of their long-lost teammate, ugly tears and equally ugly sounds coming from all three. The little, nagging, hateful, angry distrust that had been living and breathing in his lungs had finally left in a heavy exhale, relief filling them instead, and everything had been right in the world at that moment when Minato had managed pulled the man from the ground into a hug of his own. Get comfortable. I have a long story to tell. He knows there's still so much they need to talk about, things that need to be discussed. But, Aito, the soup is boiling over. He can dedicate some time later to think on it. Right now, he just wants to bask in the feeling of having his team again, whole and alive and together, of the rightness that finally settles in his bones. He grins, mentally counting down the hours when his teacher and his teammate will be back. Got it. A flash of fiery red hair is his only warning before Kakashi is bowled over with a shout of, Kakashi-kun. He'd know that boisterous voice anywhere. He has no chance to prepare though, as the door swings open enthusiastically and he is nearly lifted off the ground completely in a bone-crushing hug that should be registered as a weapon. His ribs creak loudly in protest as the deceptively petite redhead squeezes him within an inch of his life and joy, nearly a head shorter than him but always so full of life, bright like a blazing sun. Ah, he groans, earning twin snickers from his two teammates inside the apartment, and a sigh from his teacher beside him, Kushina-san. It's nice to see you again too. The redhead drops him and pulls back abruptly, hands on her hips, a scowl on her face and, to Kakashi's utmost horror, eyes narrowed and shining with tears. What's with the formality, Kakashi-kun? Just because you're all grown up now it doesn't mean I'm not still your Nei-san, databang. She then proceeds to reach up to whack the back of his head like he was Minato's new, rude little genin student with poor social skills instead of the deadly, respected shinobi he's grown into. It's an old argument, one that he's always ducked out of with a curt excuse so he wouldn't have to get closer to his teacher's at the time girlfriend, because back then having ties was dangerous and did, lead to heartbreak and weakness. But now, he's too tired to fight and decides he's allowed to indulge himself. He smiles sheepishly under his mask, apologetic but inordinately happy. Kushina-san then, her surprise followed by her beaming smile, is too much, and he looks somewhere else where that beautiful expression can't hurt him because it looks so much like the last time he'd seen her. Her face had been splattered red with her and her husband's blood, blossoming from a gaping hole in her chest with her lips curled into a pale smile and looking so content and so relieved to lie beside her baby boy, her incredible son she'd never know, hair spilling around her like a river of fire. Kakashi has to swallow hard and shake the image from his mind because this isn't the time or place. For all the tact that Kushina usually lacks, she must see some of the sorrow slinking across his face like skulking shadows and just turns on her heel to enter the apartment, throwing a, "Hurry up and get inside you too. I have dinner waiting," over her shoulder. Minato makes a sound of complaint. Kushina, I thought I said we'd be back late, you didn't have to wait up for us. Despite his protest, his eyes shine with fondness and love when he looks at her. Kushina clucked her tongue, unaware of the puppy eyes Sensei was giving her, too busy waving a wooden spoon threateningly at them, and Kakashi is mildly alarmed to see the beginnings of the red-hot habanero about to unleash her fury. None of that. Obito-kun and Rinchan told me it would take a while, and nothing is better than a hot meal and some tea after dealing with those ridiculous, crusty, selfish, uncompromising, egotistical MMPH. Kakashi quickly averts his eyes from the quick kiss his sensei plants on her. Minato pulls back with a dopey grin. I know, dear, but it's better to get it over with now. Where did Obito and Rin go just now anyway? As if summoned, the two in question reappear, both wearing simple jounin blues without their vests or headbands, and beckon them all to come to the table. They look soft like this, no less capable but not quite so invulnerable. Normal. Kakashi squashes the completely irrational urge to secure the perimeter to make sure no one can hurt them when they're so open and relaxed. Ignorant to his thoughts, Obito grins. We were setting up the table, sensei. Come on, let's eat. Kakashi makes a move to step forward but freezes when he smells salt-broiled sori and miso soup with eggplant among the dishes, heart lurching in his chest a little because no one knows that it's his favorite dish besides Kushina, who'd bullied it out of him after a particularly rough mission that left him bedridden in her and sensei's care for 3 days, but this does not deter his team. He is more or less dragged to the table anyway, squeezed into a seat between his teammates and across from the Namikaze, and he's a little too overwhelmed to do more than comply. Oh, roasted potatoes. My favorite. Obito. Don't start eating until everyone has food, it's rude. How was your day, dear? Eventful. Everything looks delicious, as usual. Kakashi feels lost. Sitting here, eating a home-cooked meal with all the people he holds dear, is not a place he's ever imagined for himself, especially as undeserving as he is. But he finds that the guilt and anxiety that normally consumes his thoughts retreats farther and farther back into his mind as Obito and Rin jostle closer, as Kushina shoves more food onto his plate, as Minato complains about the nosy council, as they all bicker and tease each other with a sense of long familiarity and affection. The house is warm and full of laughter with pictures on every surface and clutter on the coffee table, kunai marks on the walls and mysterious stains worn into the wallpaper, an old quilt thrown over the back of the beaten couch and signs of life in every corner. It's a home and it's filled with family. Kakashi hasn't had either of those in a long time. Kushina hums her favorite tune under her breath as she washes dishes, an old song from her home that always lingers gently in her memories even if she can't quite place the name, and doesn't start when Kakashi appears by her side like a graceful shadow even if her heart ticks a beat faster for a moment. She smiles proudly. Little Kakashi has certainly grown into a fine shinobi. I told you don't need to help, you know. This time, anyways, she says with a teasing grin. He hums, warm tenor, a stark contrast to the sharp alto of his early teens. I seem to remember a certain Hokage's wife trying to beat manners into me as a kid. Helping with dishes was one of them. Kushina snorts. Looks like it finally stuck too. Since when do you care for manners anyway, beating or no? Guests aren't supposed to help clean the mess they made? He asks slightly with a note of humor, sleeves rolled up and hands expertly taking the dishes she washes and carefully drying them. She glares playfully up at him, and since when has she needed to look up to the shortest member of Minato's team? And bumps her hip against his, ignoring the way he tenses and chiding gently. You're not a guest, Kakashi-kun. You're family. Family helps because they want to, not because they have to. Even if they do complain about it. She tilts her head, able to hear Obito's grumbling about having to clean up a broken plate, while Rin lectures him about roughhousing at the dinner table. It's a familiar argument even though it's rare for Obito to accidentally break anything, but for Kakashi, she reflects, it must be a new experience. The thought makes her sad. She glances at him, puzzled, when he doesn't automatically take the wet plate she offers him, and her heart breaks a little at the thinly veiled but genuine confusion she finds. She's suddenly reminded of how young Kakashi really is, for all that he is over a decade and a half older than she remembers. I see, he says slowly, visible eye unblinking and solemn, and she knows he doesn't, not at all, but she doesn't press because she knows these things take time. She wonders how much time they have. They go back to washing the dishes side by side without another word, but when he begins to quietly hum her melody, she smiles and hums with him. As soon as they are settled with some tea and Kushina's favorite mochi, no one comments when Kakashi takes the only armchair, in the corner and out of reach. Obito fires off the questions that have no doubt been plaguing his mind all day but were kept at bay by Rin's sharp looks. Hey, so how was the meeting? What kind of stuff did they ask you? Did anyone yell? Did you take off your mask? Kakashi gives him a flat look. Horrible, personal, no and no. Thank you, by the way, for warning me beforehand. Oh wait, you didn't? Obito grins in delight. Ah, come on Kakashi. I couldn't think of a better prank. That's evil Obito-kun. Kushina cackles. I love it. Sensei certainly didn't help. Kakashi sniffs. Minato squawks indignantly. Wait a minute, I can't exactly keep a leash on all of them, can I? It's not my fault they can't take turns like adults. At least they stuck to the don't ask about his world rule, for the most part. And I saved you from an on-floor evaluation by Ibiki. Kakashi pretends he's deaf and Rin laughs. It's probably because they're so bored and this is the most interesting thing that's happened in a while. Obito is practically vibrating with energy, asking with a mouthful of mochi, so? Are you gonna start going on missions with us? It's a loaded question even if Obito probably doesn't mean it to be one. Kakashi doesn't have a good answer for because there are too many things to think about first. Uncertainties that he hasn't had time to examine, but before Kakashi can find a suitable answer that won't dampen their good spirits, Minato clears his throat. He thinks his sensei has an excuse to cover for him, but instead Minato's expression is sheepishly guilty and Kakashi eyes him with suspicion. Actually, about that Kakashi, even before the meeting began, they agreed that if you passed their psych tests, you would still need to prove your proficiency in all the shinobi arts at a jounin level before they can reinstate you in any capacity, and afterwards you would be under heavily supervised probation until they're convinced without a shadow of a doubt you're you. Kushina's expression sours. They still think he's a fake? Even after all the tests Tsunadeheim ran and the SCR dash? Obito's sudden choking fit interrupts her, and she has to pound him on the back to keep him from dying a dishonorable death. Minato's laughs almost nervously. You know how they can be. Rin straightens where she sits, a gleam in her eye. She hums thoughtfully as a slow grin starts to spread across her usually angelic face. Obito's isn't any better when he finally stops choking and figures out what Rin is thinking. So an exhibition match? Minato nods and parrots with a smirk of his own. An exhibition match. Kakashi is unsurprised and wholly unimpressed. Minato grins at him. I understand it seems a bit ridiculous, but you can't blame them for their curiosity, can you? The smile brightens with pride, and Kakashi despairs because it seems even after all this time, he's helpless to his sensei's whims. I know you'll do fantastic, Kakashi-kun. Kakashi glowers harder at him. Rin laughs, grinning in excitement. What does that entail, exactly? I'm assuming it's a series of matches to test my level of proficiency in each area of combat. Kakashi theorizes, somehow looking deep in thought and bored. If so, I'll most likely be pitted against Kurenai for Genjutsu, Guy for Taijutsu, Hate for Kenjutsu and weapons, and Obito for the Sharingan. He looks out the window for a moment consideringly. I don't know of any ninjutsu specialist aside from myself, and it's more than likely there will be a team combat exercise to measure my capabilities as a leader and team member. But who they choose for that? I wouldn't know who the best candidates are among the registered shinobi here are. It's likely they'll group me with a pair that already have solid teamwork. Perhaps Kotetsu and Izumo. Chunin rank, Jounin skills, and teamwork comparable to the previous generation of Ino Shikacho. Or maybe Genma's team. Takami is out of the country on a mission. It would make sense for them to place me with Genma and Raider for a higher level mission. Silence follows his explanation, and he looks back to see Obito glaring at him, while Rin smiles, Kushina stares, and Minato beams proudly, unsurprised. What? He asks flatly. Minato's smile doesn't dim, but he narrows his eyes suspiciously, giving him a sly fox-like expression Kakashi usually associates with Kushina or Naruto. I would ask if you broke into my office again. Don't think I didn't notice and looked into the file containing your matchups, but I also know you probably just figured that out on your own. He shakes his head in exasperation but also a bit of proud wonder. You never cease to surprise me. The unexpected compliment, sincere and heartfelt, nearly makes Kakashi drop his tea, flustered. By Rin's smile and Obito's snicker, his reaction is more apparent than he intends, and he subtly glowers at them. That's all right, but I'm not surprised you don't know who you're going against in ninjutsu. We'll keep it a surprise for now. Minato winks, and Kakashi holds a sigh because he recognizes the mischievous streak in his teacher, and knows this will probably not end well for him. Well, Rin says as she leans back comfortably with her tea, This will certainly be interesting. Kakashi narrows his eyes at his teammates because they look too suspiciously excited to mean anything good for his health or sanity. Speaking of interesting things, Kushina grins, practically vibrating with excitement. I just got a missive from Ino-chan. Her team is on their way back from T-Country and will be home in about a week. Kakashi raises an eyebrow in question and Minato explains with his own wide smile. Jiraiya-sensei took Naruto out to Otafuka for a while, and they ended up meeting Team Asuma while they were in the middle of dealing with a complication in their mission. Since the situation wasn't dire and Jiraiya-sensei heard about Guy and his team finding you, he came back as soon as he could and left Naruto to stay and assist Team Asuma and return home with them. Kakashi remembers reading about this in one of his sensei's files. Naruto is officially Jiraiya's apprentice, has been ever since graduating the academy top of his class, and has been traveling around the 5 nations for months at a time ever since. He also remembers seeing reports of insubordination and belligerence, not exactly a surprise, in all honesty whenever he was ever assigned to a team in the months in between his trips outside the village, but the behavior only started up a few years ago and was accompanied by other strange behavior. He's willing to bet it's a simple case of puberty and teenage rebellion would have anyway, if Sasuke's files hadn't been blacked out at around the same time, or that Sakura had dropped out of the academy within 5 years even after showing similar promise of graduating as top kunoichi as in his world. It makes his gut churn sickly, but he keeps those feelings from showing, instead inquiring, "Oh? I thought I saw Asuma earlier though. Former Team 10 leading their own missions now?" Minato nods. Yeah, they're all already Chunin and technically aren't Team 10 anymore, so Asuma felt it was alright to let them on a few B ranks by themselves a few months ago. Gives Shikamaru-kun a bit of room to grow as a leader. Trying to get him to sign up for the Jounin exams then? Kakashi asks wryly, trying being the keyword. Rin comments with a laugh. Shikamaru is one of the least motivated but most eligible of his team. A thought strikes him. You and Obito aren't senseis, are you? Rin blinks in surprise before shaking her head with a rueful smile. Oh no, no way. I'm way too busy directing the hospital with Shizun and teaching class at the academy to even think about taking on a genin team. After Tsunade Shosho retired a while back, Shizun went with her on a 3-year trip around the nations and I had to do a complete overhaul in the system because people became so lax without her to whip them back into shape. Besides, there are plenty of other Jounin sensei to teach the next generation. Obito nods. Yeah, I would have thought about it if it was sensei's kid, but Naruto's been picked up by Jiraiya Gigi, so I figured I'd just open a Kenjutsu school with hate and stay an active duty Jounin. This is news to Kakashi, and he realizes that as much as he thinks of his teammates and their deaths, he's never given much thought to what they would have done with their lives if they'd lived to see the end of the war. It's too painful to think of the potential he snuffed out so young, but now he's so curious he can't help but say, tell me about it. The look of bewilderment on Rin and Obito's face is hilarious, as is the surprised delight on Minato's. But Kakashi means it, and he can tell his sincerity has thrown them off guard. Oh, Rin coughs, pinking in a bit of embarrassment at his genuine interest and the encouragement from Kushina and Obito. Well, after the Kanabi Bridge, since Obito was busy mastering your father's Tanto and the Sharingan, I decided to seek out Shusho and became her apprentice with Shizun. Kakashi spends the next few hours listening to his teammates' lives and commits every detail to memory. We figured you'd be a little weirded out living here, so you'll be staying with me, Obito says around a yawn, but there's a touch of insecurity in his tone. 13-year-old Obito would never have offered in the first place, would have shouted in protest until he was blue in the face, made a racket until sensei ordered him to settle down. 13-year-old Kakashi would have flat out said no and walked away. Neither of them are 13 anymore. Alright then, Kakashi nods easily. Lead the way. The Namikes wave them off and Rin splits from them halfway to go to her own home with a goodbye and a promise to meet up tomorrow since she has 2 more days of leave, so it's just them running across rooftops at a leisurely pace in companionable silence. They head towards an area Kakashi vaguely recognizes from before Pain's attack, a block of apartments with more civilians than shinobi, close to the market and a good ways away from the Uchiha compound, and wonders if Obito's home is like his personality, bright, cheery, and a chaotic mess. What he sees is completely different than what he expects. Obito welcomes him in almost nervously, standing awkwardly in the middle of his living room and rubbing the back of his neck as he points out the kitchen and dining room as well as the bathroom and 2 bedrooms. He shifts nervously on his feet, as if he's not sure he should offer Kakashi tea or show him personally to the guest room, and Kakashi honestly doesn't know what to do either. It seems, without Sensei or Rin or even Kushina around as a buffer, being in the same room will not be quite as easy as they thought. It's when Obito tells him to stay here and goes to put his gear away that Kakashi realizes why the place feels so strange. The apartment is almost exactly like his, not in possessions or location, and Kakashi's lacks a proper sitting room or second bedroom for a few nieces and nephews that like to sleep over, but they are identical in spirit despite the little bits of personality it has. There are very few pictures. He can see a small frame of Team 7 on his nightstand that mirrors Kakashi's among a couple others and almost no decorations aside from some children's artwork on the fridge. There's a bookshelf full of various literature studies on politics, geographical map books, tomes on jutsu and theory, kenjutsu texts, and more than a few clan-specific scrolls Kakashi recognizes from the few times he's been to the Uchiha compound while it was still inhabited. Aside from a few papers littering the dining room table and dishes in the sink, the apartment is bare and almost militant in its lack of personality, a far cry from Sensei's home. Obito ambles back in just his undershirt and loose pants, breaking Kakashi's thoughts, black hair falling slightly into his eyes without his ridiculous orange goggles and footsteps obnoxious in the quiet apartment. Kakashi wonders if it's on purpose. He doesn't comment. Since we didn't really plan ahead, here's some of my stuff you can wear until you get some clothes. Good thing you're not so short anymore, maybe you won't drown in my shirt. Obito smirks, tossing a small pile of clothing into his hands. He jerks his head towards the hallway he came from, bathrooms down the hall to the left. Go shower, you still reek of the hospital. Kakashi rolls his visible eye good-naturedly as he walks past. Happens when your nosy teammates and nosy counsel won't let you take a proper shower after waking up from a 3-day coma. Obito sticks his tongue out juvenilely at him, and the world settles closer to normal. His shower is quick and he's glad to be rid of the slightly ill-fitting uniform he'd swiped earlier. He stalls when he sees the undershirt, though custom made with extra fabric for a mask, and wrinkles his nose at the faint musty smell even as he puts it on with only slightly trembling hands. It's not his sleeveless gear that he wore during and after his days as an ANBU operative, but the clothes he wore as a young teenager that stretches just enough to fit his larger frame and cover his face. The borrowed shirt is a bit wide in the shoulders and the pants need to be tightened a bit around his waist, hems brushing against his ankles strangely, but they are otherwise the same size and height. It's a strange thought that Obito has grown into a young man when in Kakashi's mind he will always be a half-crushed teenager, but he discards the morbid sentiment and follows his nose to the kitchen where the scent of tea is strongest. Obito looks tired and a bit uncomfortable but still content sitting at the small dining room table, a steaming cup of tea clutched between his hands with another unpoured cup on the counter as a silent offer, and Kakashi can guess why. It's not easy, this strange situation, and he can feel exhaustion and uncertainty start to expand where the adrenaline and elation has left. He settles across from Obito with his own cup of tea, Kushina's special blend meant to settle nerves after a particularly hazardous mission, both quiet in their thoughts as the moon shines high and bright in the sky. He notices Obito's less that subtle glances at his face, still covered by the mask, but it's perhaps the first time his friend has seen him out of uniform. Damp hair falling in front of his scarred eye, shoulders slightly slumped with exhaustion, wearing nothing but the comfortable clothes given. He wonders what he looks like, because he feels vulnerable. They have a lot to talk about, a lot of buried issues to sort through, but for now, he has one question on his mind. So why aren't you and Rin married? He narrowly avoids a spray of hot tea, watching with thinly veiled, slightly sadistic amusement as his friend chokes on the bitter liquid. Obito throws him a watery-eyed glare. What? Why were you asking me that? Kakashi leans back, arms crossed and eye narrowed. I didn't die for you to not make a move, idiot. Bastard. Obito grumbles at him as he wipes up the spill, flush creeping up his neck and spreading across his face like wildfire. Ah, the curse of having an Uchiha's fair skin and no mask to cover it. It's not like I haven't thought about it, you know. It's just Obito stops, looking into his teacup like it holds all the answers in the world. She was still in love with you when you died. I couldn't compete with that. Still can't. Her crush, throwing a mission and dying to save her and her best friend? Come on. Kakashi unsympathetically kicks him under the table, ignoring the multitude of swears thrown at him in a furious hiss. Still an idiot after all these years. She likes you, make a move already? Since when are you a relationship counselor? Obito snarks, a little less cowed but still unsure, pouting mulishly at nothing. Besides, what if she just likes me because of her old feelings for YOW? What the hell, Kakashi? Shut up, you'll wake the neighbors. Kakashi chides, foot smarting a bit at how hard he kicked the other man's shin. You said it yourself? It was a crush, a long time ago. She's over it, probably. Kakashi can't say he's very good with emotions, as evidenced by the multiple times he's been confused by or pissed off one or more of the females, and males, and everyone in general, really, in his life, but he's sure that the camaraderie he shared with her earlier is just that. Fractured and riddled with cracks and landmines, but platonic all the same. Obito stays stubbornly silent. Alright then, different approach. Why don't you talk to her about it? Obito glares at him for a moment longer before his ire leaves him and he slumps dejectedly. It's not that simple. Rin, I'm in love with you. 6 words. I assumed you knew at least that many. Or marry me, 2 words. Even easier. I hate you. Kakashi pinches the bridge of his nose, too tired to indulge the other's ridiculousness anymore tonight, temples pulsing with steadily increasing pain. He sighs and mutters, I'm too old for this. You're too old for this. Obito still has that stubborn look on his face though, and Kakashi knows this is going to be a work in progress. Fine. When you get yourself together and finally make a move, I'm going to be the first one that says I told you so. Obito grins. I know you will, bastard. The Uchiha gets up to go to sleep a short while later with a quiet goodnight, a genuine smile on his lips, leaving Kakashi to his thoughts in the early morning. Obito has left his classes with hate for the last few days and plans on stopping in to relieve the other instructor for a bit, but afterwards he is free to spend the day with Kakashi and Rin, and later Sensei, Kushina, Jiraiya, and Tsunade. Kakashi should sleep, he knows, especially with the meeting he has with Inoichi and Ibiki, and he glances at the ridiculous frog clock on the wall. 5 hours for further questioning. So he languidly puts the teacup in the sink and makes his way to the guest bedroom. He won't sleep for some time, he knows. It feels like there's a boulder on his chest, weighing him down while he's at the bottom of a freezing lake and drowning with a blindfold on, and he can't swim, can't breathe, can't do much but endure the numbing sensation that begins to spread from his fingers and toes. The burning in his lungs that has only worsened throughout the day is near unbearable now, but he knows how to lock down on the irrational fear and panic that threatens to overwhelm him so he won't wake Aito, can silently ride out the claustrophobia clawing at his throat. He's done this before, plenty of times, and stops by the bathroom to wash his hands exactly 12 times until they are raw and red. He closes his eyes and all he sees is blood. Aito stumbles blearily out of his bedroom 5 hours later, yawning wide enough to crack his jaw, and nearly trips when he sees Kakashi leaning casually against the kitchen counter in his full uniform with a cup of tea and a pug wearing a blue uniform beside him who raises a paw in greeting. Aito waves dumbly back, but his eyes are on his friend, on Kakashi, who looks sleep-rumpled and every bit the scarecrow in his name, and so unlike the put-together Chunin turned Jounin in his memories. And if Aito didn't know any better, he would think his teammate hadn't slept at all. Aito almost hadn't until exhaustion finally dragged him under, terror plaguing his mind that this wasn't real and that he would wake up to an empty apartment. But seeing his friend calmly reading the paper in his kitchen like he has no better place to be, it hits him with a dizzying sense of relief. It wasn't a dream. What? Aito nearly jumps out of his skin and meets Kakashi's lazy gaze, startled. He doesn't want to say what's on his mind in fear of doing something embarrassing like crying again. But Kakashi's inquisitive stare is hard to ignore. It's hard to ignore he's alive and here in the first place. He rubs the back of his head sheepishly and says honestly, I'm just surprised yesterday wasn't a dream. He looks away in search of his favorite mug, not willing to deal with Kakashi's mocking so early in the morning from the unintended confession, but nearly drops it when he hears Kakashi reply simply, I'm glad it wasn't. Yeah, Aito agrees, quiet as he sets the kettle to boil. Yeah, me too. His morning routine is now interrupted so he can't help all the noise he makes as he grabs his favorite mug and the dwindling stash of coffee he picked up in grass. But Kakashi doesn't eye him disapprovingly for all the bumbling gracelessness, like he half expects, actually looks amused, the bastard, and merely keeps his attention on the newspaper he's somehow acquired. The pug, Pakin, Aito remembers vaguely, growls something at Kakashi, too low for Aito to hear, before he poofs away into a cloud of smoke. Aito doesn't remember sensing the summoning and wonders when his teammate managed to do that without him noticing. His thoughts are broken when Kakashi comments airily, you're up early. It's not so much an observation as it is a roundabout inquiry, and Aito smirks a bit at how pointedly disinterested Kakashi sounds. Yeah, I gotta get there a bit early to prep before the students start trickling in. Enko's been helping out, but I know she probably has some prank set up for the kids, and if I get another civvy parent breaking down my door to yell at me about an unsafe learning environment, I'm actually going to go crazy. His skin prickles and he looks up to see Kakashi looking at him, I still half-masked but intent. Early. Aito blinks for a minute, and he can feel a laugh bubble up in his chest at what would have been a gobsmacked expression on anyone else, has to beat down on the old, ridiculous urge to puff up proudly about how he's grown up since their last mission together. He doesn't do either. He rubs the back of his neck again in faint embarrassment, ducking his head. Yeah? I get to places on time. Usually. At least I try not to be late like before. I have to leave an hour or so earlier than usual too, but yeah. I'm not late anymore. I don't ever want to be too late again, Aito thinks fiercely. His head shoots up in surprise when he hears Kakashi not scolding or mocking him but laughing, an honest, quiet huff that sounds a little forced and a little sad but completely genuine. He's about to ask Kakashi if he's hit his head recently until the other man says, we make quite a pair, don't we? What do you? Aito looks at the clock, remembers Kakashi telling him he has an appointment with the torture and interrogation department at 7 sharp, remembers that it is already 7 in the morning, and gapes, you dash. He jumps up from his seat, nearly spilling his coffee everywhere and very close to shouting, you're late. You know you're late. It takes like 20 minutes to get to headquarters and get through clearance. What are you doing, Kakashi? You hate being late. You get to places early. Why the hell are you still here? Your Ibiki's gonna kill you. Kakashi nods like it's all true, and his words come back to Aito in a flash. We make quite a pair, don't we? Oh, he thinks, more awake than he's been in a long time. After a pause, Kakashi tilts his head to the side and muses, so, what excuse should I use? Black cat? No, too boring. Helping an old lady cross the street? I need something more creative if I want to annoy Ibiki. Aito blinks in shock, unable to get over the fact that apparently his uptight, by the book, follow the rules, never be late, emotions are weakness teammate is already late for an important meeting and doesn't seem to care, is thinking of ridiculous excuses that ring familiar in Aito's mind because they used to be his excuses once upon a time. Excuses that still sit at the tip of his tongue at times, but he swallows down because he was too late to save his comrades, so he has no right to use them anymore. Because there is no excuse for letting your friend die. because being a shinobi isn't all fun and games, right? One of IWA Nin caused the cave to collapse. A rock hit me in my blind spot and I went down, and Abito threw me out of the way. He was half crushed under the boulder instead, and alive long enough to give me his eye. He saved my life at the cost of his. Kakashi! Kakashi, you bastard, stay awake! You gotta stay awake, okay? Sensei's coming. You can't just do something stupid like get killed for me, you selfish asshole. Call me an idiot, yell at me, do something, please just damn it. Rin, is he Dash? We make quite a pair, don't we? What a twisted way to finally begin to understand each other. Despite his morbid thoughts and Kakashi's haunting story lingering in his mind, words that probably won't leave him for as long as he lives, Abito can't help but think with a slowly forming grin of his own, we really do. I dunno, I always liked the classic I had to save a kitten out of a tree one, he offers with shrug. It probably won't faze Ibiki, but Inoichi-san will definitely think you've lost your marbles. That's true. Ibiki's a hard one to crack. A strange peace settles around them as they come up with excuses more absurd than the last. Time slipping by as they talk with none of the lingering awkwardness from last night, and Abito thinks he wouldn't mind getting up early if this is what he wakes up to. They both end up late with the same ridiculous excuse on their lips. Sorry I'm late, I got lost on the road of life. Ibiki doesn't bat an eye. Then again, Kakashi doesn't really expect him to. Marino Ibiki has always been as immovable as the Hokage mountain when he wants to be, the hard edges of his face sometimes sharp and cold as ice-streaked stone. Not even Kakashi's admittedly half-assed attempts at making him twitch have ever worked, and he doesn't think it's going to start now. It's a trait that the Hatake both loathes and admires. On one notable occasion during the height of his career in ANBU, he remembers droning on about nothing for a good half-hour during one of his mandatory psych evals after a particularly long, gruesome mission. He's not allowed to see the regular psychologists after his second one broke down in the middle of one of their sessions. Only to find out that the notes Ibiki had been so diligently taking the entire time were actually items on his grocery list for later that day. Kakashi had laughed, raspy and broken, for the first time in 7 months because of that. But this Ibiki doesn't know him, and Kakashi has to remind himself that the harsh-looking man in front of him hasn't listened to his stupid excuses for years and years. Probably won't tolerate long-winded stories of fantasy like the one back at home, especially not from someone he perceives as a threat to Konoha or her people. Kakashi doesn't particularly like the man. In all honesty, he is far too sadistic for Kakashi to be completely comfortable being around for long periods of time, and he takes a little too much joy out of his work. But Kakashi can see why the Sandaime held him in such high regard. He is a good man, as good as circumstance and perception allow him to be. With such staunch loyalty to the village, it makes even Kakashi's unwavering dedication seem weak and half-hearted at best. Which is why Kakashi knows this is not a time to test that terrifying, limitless patience. The head interrogator stands steady and solid in front of him in his usual black trench coat and shinobi gear, scarred head covered by the scarf that doesn't conceal the rough lines gouged into his face. There are a few new ones Kakashi's perfect memory doesn't recall, and it just makes him all the more menacing. Hatake Kakashi, presumed Jounin of Kanehigakure, identification number 009720. Follow me. Ibiki gruffly orders. Kakashi does, walking behind the man at a leisurely slouch with 2 nervous guards behind him, neither of which he recognizes. He's sure Anko must be cackling in the shadows somewhere. He's taken to an interrogation room he somewhat recognizes only because it is so similar to the countless others he's been in. Debriefings after long undercover ops are never fun, and he mentally shudders at the memory of being both the interrogator and the interrogated. He sits without command, already well acquainted with procedures, and Ibiki's face gives away nothing. To his mild surprise, instead of Yamanaka Inoichi, a different shinobi comes to stand in front of him, blonde and vaguely familiar. Maybe a Yamanaka branch member? He's young, probably a bit younger than Kakashi, but he must be skilled for Ibiki to entrust him with this. The man doesn't give much away either, at least not visually. It takes a lot more training to conceal all his tells though, and Kakashi's sensitive nose can pick up on the sense of nervousness and anxiety, exhaustion and an undercurrent of something vaguely sweet like honey milk. Interesting. Hatake Kakashi-san? For the first portion of the evaluation, Kakashi internally rolls his eyes. Evaluation his ass. I need to see both eyes and look into your memories of yesterday, specifically the council meeting after your background overview. Kakashi knows this little trick. It's a favorite of Ibiki's, to test the legitimacy of one's memories without diving deeply into the psyche, something very few can do without the Yamanaka's secret techniques, even few still with enough skill to perform them safely, as well as gauge the subject's mental fortitude and emotional stability. And of course, Ibiki just had to choose the most trying part of the meeting. Please reveal your eye. Please reveal your eye. Somewhere in his periphery, he can see Uchiha Fugaku stiffen in his seat and Hyuga Hayashi lean forward in interest. With a silent sigh, he lifts his headband and opens his scarred eye. Gasps erupt immediately at the sight of Obito's Sharingan, 3 tomos spinning lazily despite the sudden spike in chakra and killing intent that he can now see clearly, colors suddenly brighter and lines of the council members' craggy faces sharper. He isn't immediately accosted by ANBU despite the white-knuckled grips some shinobi have on their weapons, which isn't much of a surprise. It just means they had been informed prior to now, through rumors or an official announcement. Kakashi doesn't know or care, otherwise he is sure there would have been a bigger uproar with more than a few of the people here demanding his head before he could say another word. The lingering disbelief twisting some faces fades completely, only to be replaced with contempt. He ignores Danzo's sharp gaze and the intrigue that glimmers for half a second before it shut away. Minato stays professional at the first sight of it, but there are grim lines around his mouth, faint and grieving, no doubt remembering Kakashi's story and knowing he's about to hear it again. The sudden hush that had followed the reveal is broken by Uchiha Fugaka's gravely voice. How did you acquire the Sharingan? The words are so tightly controlled and void of anything like rage or accusation that Kakashi honestly can't tell if the Uchiha clan head is completely detached from the sight of a clan member's eye or planning his assassination. It doesn't matter. Kakashi steels himself, still a little raw from the afternoon of essentially spilling his soul not even a half a day ago now to the very people who deserve to hear it most, but has always been a shinobi before a man, a tool before a human being. It takes half a second to shudder the heartache and remember emotions are weakness. It's sad how easily he slips into that mindset again. During the mission to destroy the Kanobi Bridge 16 years ago, I lost my eye protecting my teammate Uchiha Obito, and the incident caused him to activate his Sharingan. We went on to rescue our teammate, Noura Rin, who'd been captured earlier in the mission and interrogated for information. Enemy Iwa Nin caused the cave we found her in to collapse, and a rock hit me in my blind side. The faces in front of him blur as he sinks back into those moments, impassive words never giving way to the brimming sorrow and rage that twist sickly in his gut even nearly 2 decades later. Obito pushed me out of the way of a falling boulder, and half his body was crushed by the rubble. He was still alive long enough to entrust his remaining Sharingan to me, and Rin was able to complete the transplant with little damage done to me or the Sharingan. Before we could be overwhelmed by backup, Minato-sensei arrived to take out the remaining enemy, and we completed the mission to destroy the bridge. It's my fault, we left him behind. We left him to die, and it's all my. He says it all with the callous professionalism expected from him, tone devoid of any of the crippling guilt he still feels coursing through him, lacking the proper meaning to express just profound. Obito's words and actions that day had changed him so fundamentally. After all, they aren't gathered here for a bedtime story told by a war-weary veteran who's survived longer than he should have and is living on borrowed time. They don't care for the heroic, life-changing actions of one black sheep from another lifetime who they'll never meet, despite seeing him at Minato's side with orange goggles and a wide grin. Kakashi can't explain just how much of his world is shaped by a handful of words and an unfair sacrifice. Even if he did, he doubts they would understand or even try. He comes back to himself quickly, like surfacing from a dream, and notices the pale complexion of the Yamanaka in front of him. Yamanaka Ryo, husband of Yamanaka Tsumaki and father of baby Yamanaka Ko, protect them, just returned from interrogating suspected root members, promoted to Jounin 1 year ago, and there's one red eye, just one. Blood red, and mentally shakes away the foreign memories and feelings clinging to him. Kakashi slowly covers his eye again, bored gaze meeting Ibiki's steady one. Ryo looks at Ibiki, the blue of his eyes brighter in contrast to the paleness of his face, and it just makes the resemblance to Asuma's student all the more apparent. Something must pass between them with a Yamanaka technique, because Kakashi's sharp ears can't hear anything but Ryo's slightly ragged breaths. The moment passes and the two shinobi standing guard, tense and wary, escort Ryo out of the interrogation room, leaving Kakashi alone with Ibiki and his unreadable gaze. Kakashi shakes off the urge to assure Yamanaka-san that yes, his wife will love it if he comes home from work early for once, and that he should bring her favorite flowers, tulips, because he doesn't actually know anything about the man. The side effects of such an invasive procedure, even on the most basic level, are the most annoying. I hate mind techniques. Kakashi breaks the silence 10 minutes later when it's obvious Ibiki won't. That was a little mean, don't you think? Ibiki's voice is monotone. I have no idea what you mean. That was Ryokun's, 7th time performing that technique in the last 4 days? Kakashi asks, but he doesn't really need to because he already knows. He's got a 6-month-old at home. You really think he got a full night's sleep before this? No wonder the man smelled faintly like a nursery. I'll take that into consideration next time, Ibiki deadpants. But you're not here to evaluate my employees. He walks over to the one table in the room and picks up a single file thick despite only holding maybe 8 years worth of data. Kakashi knows this because that's his file. Hatake Kakashi, Jounin exam evaluation, age 12. Personality described as efficient and capable in the field, highly intelligent, high potential for leadership position, organized to an almost obsessive-compulsive degree. See page 7 for further details. Apathetic to thoughts and feelings of your peers, follows Shinobi rule book rigidly, disregards anyone who is not a commanding officer. See page 9 for further details. Arrogant but not to a dangerous degree, callous and ruthless in regards to completing missions, puts the mission before well-being of his team confirmed by several teammates, and team leaders further assessment required. Any of that sound about right? Kakashi suppresses a wince. He doesn't recall ever accessing his results after his promotion, but those, unfortunately, sounded like fairly accurate observations. Devilishly handsome and charming are missing, but I suppose that was an apt description at the time. The subtle, Oppressive air surrounding Ibiki lessens even if his face doesn't outwardly change. Seems they miss smartass too. I'll make a note of it, Kakashi smiles. Sarcastically, I don't care about your world. It has no effect on this one, and I already have my hands full with one village. Who you are now is the question, Ibiki begins, and the severity of the situation returns. How you got here? How long you're here for? Have any answers for me after a night of sleeping on it? Something scratches against his skin even beneath his clothes, and after a moment he recognizes it as Ibiki's chakra molding to his body, a constant check on his vitals like his heartbeat, body temperature, and blood pressure, maybe even deeper, and touching the very outskirts of his mind. Just this alone would cause a normal prisoner's heart to skip several times in terror or surprise, and Kakashi is no exception, but he wills it steady after 2 beats. He considers the man before him soberly, lone-eyed, dark and piercing. This is the time for the brutal honesty he is so well known for, at any age and any time in any world. I'm not the same person who died in Obito's place, but I'm not a threat to Konoha or anyone in it. No stutter in his heart, no lie in his words. I don't know how I got here, but I remember a mission to retrieve something from deep within Kaminari no Kuni near Genbu. It's fuzzy, but like a dream it escapes him faster the more he tries to concentrate. He catches Ibiki mutter darkly, the ancient lands. The huge mountain ranges and heavy, year-round mist made the land near the coast almost impossible to traverse, with only a single, dangerous path for Kumo shinobi to reach Genbu Turtle Island, Kumo's version of the Forest of Death. It's old land, even older than the waters surrounding Yuzushiogakure, and it's not uncommon to find ancient cities buried deep within the earth and reaching all across the 5 nations. Kakashi is sure he was sent to one of the old temples or abandoned cities to take something of great value. He shakes off the phantom sensation of breathing too thin air. I fought someone for a while, a few leagues away from Shimagakure, before I blacked out and woke up here. He doesn't need to say he can't recall a single detail about the person or the techniques they used, only that they were unfamiliar to him, which rules out quite a few suspects but doesn't narrow it down enough. Whatever he'd taken, it must have been worth going after someone of his fame and caliber to take it back. Ibiki grunts an affirmative, and the cold, rough feeling of his chakra recedes at last. You were in bad shape when Guy and his team found you. They lost you on the operating table twice before they finally got you stabilized. Kakashi didn't realize his condition had been so severe. It explains why Rin and Minato, the two most likely to stay updated on his condition, had looked so relieved after Rin's short physical after dinner. Ibiki continues, and Kakashi doesn't need to strain to hear the suspicion in his words. Funny thing is, only half of the injuries came from combat. The other half is still up for debate, but Tsunadeheim seems to think some inhuman force is what dealt the near-fatal damage, and in areas that wouldn't cause instant death. Ibiki holds his gaze for a long moment, piercing and unnervingly perceptive, before he lets up. Now, let's start your official evaluation. You're doing it again. Rin nearly jumps and looks up, startled, to see Shizen's concerned frown. I'm what? Shizen nods to her hands playing with a scrap of gauze, wrapping and rewrapping the worn fabric around her finger over and over again in perfect conformity. Rin stops her hands and flushes guiltily at being caught. That. You only do that when you're anxious. She pauses, thoughtful, before softly prompting, is it Kakashi-san? Rin flushes for a different reason this time and has to make a conscious effort to not rewrap the scrap of fabric around her finger again. It's not I'm just. She bites her lip, slumping with a sigh. Yeah, kind of. She moves over a bit to let Shizen sit beside her on the bench, thankful for the privacy of the empty employee lounge of the hospital and the peaceful, if temporary, lull in the halls. Shizen crosses her legs and looks at her expectantly. All right, Spill? What did he do? Rin rolls her eyes. He didn't do anything, Shizen. It's a lot to take in. And adjusting it's hard, I guess. Shizen's hand settles over her own for a moment, dark eyes so understanding and earnest it makes Rin's breath catch sometimes. Tell me. I'm here for you. How is she so lucky to have not one but 2 best friends that know her so well? Rin draws in a shaky breath. I was pretty devastated when he died, remember? Shizen nods, mouth twisting. And how could she not when she was the one to pull Rin from her desolation? I thought I got over it though, as much as you can get over the death of your first-year teammate. But seeing him again, just so many feelings came rushing back and I don't really know what to do with them. She feels Shizen shift beside her, tone deceptively light when she asks, what kind of feelings? Rin finds it in herself to laugh softly in bewildered amusement. Irritation, surprisingly. She shakes her head. First thing they did when they saw each other was fall back on their name-calling. I couldn't help but remember an old mission we had when we ran border patrol along Yugakure a few months after our team formed. They just kept sniping at each other for the whole 2 weeks. And I got so sick of it I told them both to knock it off before I knocked them out. Shizen grins a little, unsurprised, and Rin grins a little back. That was the first time I ever snapped at Kakashi. Funny that's the first thing I think of. She quiets, mirth fading when she whispers, guilt. I saw him, and in all I saw was someone with an entire life to live. Shizen doesn't let go of her hand. She smiles and it's a weak, trembling imitation of her usual bright cheer, but it doesn't lack the fond wonder she always used to have when talking about something amazing he did or said when they were young. Did you know he became a Jounin sensei? Shizen doesn't, obviously, But it's so strange and real to say it out loud. He didn't say much about his students. I don't even know who they are, but it's easy to see he cares about them. He's so proud of them. I can't stop thinking, what if I was better? Stronger? What if I'd saved him? Would he be a Jounin sensei still? Who are his students training under now? She's thankful, so incredibly thankful Shizen doesn't tell her it's not her fault, that only Tsunade Shursho and very few others could have done more to save Kakashi, that she understands in a way only medics who've had patients die under their hands can. She doesn't mention Kakashi's version of events, can't even think about the possibility of Obito taking his place without feeling so sick. She's had years to mourn one teammate, she can't imagine mourning another. She sighs, leaning back against the wall and looking at the stained ceiling tiles. There's a lot of admiration too. Affection. I can't tell if it's from seeing him now or lingering feelings from when we were young. Does it change your feelings for Obito? Shizen carefully asks. Rin doesn't blush or stutter, far too old and confident to feel any embarrassment for her feelings. But it's a question she honestly doesn't know the answer to. Her friend eyes her dubiously, and Rin knows her senior apprentice is wondering just how far gone Rin had to have been on the last Hataki to be unsure of herself now. My feelings haven't changed, Zune. It's just it was easy to sort of idolize someone our age who'd been a Chunin for 3 years while we were finishing the academy, you know? He was strong and smart, always knew what to do, sensei's favorite even if he'll never admit it. He was so mysterious and talented it was easy to get caught up on who I thought he was. Who he is someone different. Someone I think I fell for before he even existed. Shizen knocks her shoulder against hers, gently prodding. What do you mean? I thought he was just another genius. Rin blinks away the image of her Kakashi, young and angry and someone she looked up to despite his age and name. Did you know Kakashi personally? When we were kids? Shizen blinks at the sudden question but shakes her head. Not really. It was more like I knew of him, mainly from my teammates, and some of your classmates. I heard rumors about his dad too, and then there was a huge buzz about him when he became a Chunin, but I left with Shursho before I ever met him. And then the mission. Rin nods, expecting as much. Typically only older shinobi really remembered Kakashi from the years he'd been out on B and C-ranked missions while the rest of his class finished the academy. They all said the same thing when they thought they could get away with it, that he was a good shinobi, could have been one of the best. But he wasn't good at being human. I didn't really see it when I was on his team, but I knew he wasn't the nicest, and he wasn't very patient. Comes with the territory of being a genius, I guess. Things that took us months to learn occupied him for maybe a week or two before he mastered it. Drove Obito nuts, Rin laughs, but it's not a nice sound. He was so blunt about everything and I could never tell if he didn't know he hurt someone's feelings or if he just didn't care. This Kakashi, he's different. She looks at Shizen with watery smile, wondering if it's normal to feel so much for someone she's spent years pushing away in her memories. I spent maybe 12 hours with him after he got out of the hospital, and he told us a lot of stuff that happened to him. And then we all had dinner together at Sensei's house, and it hit me that I don't think I've ever seen him look happy. How sad is that? Teammates for years, and I'd never known he could look like that. She clenches her jaw, has to use her carefully crafted control to keep herself from crying or saying something she shouldn't, but it's hard. The entire day yesterday was like a dream and it's just now hitting her that this is all real. I know I've barely gotten to know him, and I know he's not ours. She presses her lips together in a thin line, and breathes. It's just, I learned a lot about him. I already care about him, about this Kakashi. He fits so well, Shizen. Shizen just nods, because of course she understands what Team Minato meant to Rin even if she never felt like that about any team she'd gone on missions with. They were Team 7, a new generation, a new legend in the making. When their sensei became the Yellow Flash, there were bets on whether they'd become the next Sannin, because very few teams became so renowned without the special connection that made the first generation of Sannin so incredible, and even Jiraiya had once said he could see the potential, the greatness in them if they could just get past their personal differences. Rin could see it in her Shursho's eyes sometimes even if she never spoke a word out loud, the what if always hanging in the air when Team Minato was reunited and grieving for their own. It was a nice dream, Rin thinks a little wistfully. It still sends a pang through her, the potential never fully realized, but it's an old ache like most of her scars. Does Obito get along with him? Shizen asks, gently breaking the silence that had fallen. Aside from the name-calling, of course. Rin grins a little, shrugging, kind of. We haven't really gotten past the whole from another world thing, but he and Obito fell back into their banter pretty easily. They're just nicer now, I think. Civil. I don't think they can or want to go back to what they were, before. There's still Kakashi and Obito, though. Has he had his psych evaluation yet? Shizen asks, but there is more caution than curiosity in the way she asks it. He's seeing Marino-san right now, and later we're all having dinner at Sensei's house again. Shizen's words sharpen. And they're not going to keep him under observation until Ibiki-san is done with his analysis? Or get a second opinion from Yamanaka-san? Now Rin is confused. I know, why would they? She searches her friend's face for an answer, but she doesn't understand the apprehension she finds. Sensei said it was a routine evaluation to add to his file, Rin adds hesitantly. This doesn't seem to relax Shizen like she hopes. Instead, her friend just watches her carefully with a hawk-like gaze Rin can barely read, and for all that Rin follows Tsunade's style of fighting more closely of the two of them, she thinks Shizen is the one with their master's sharp eyes. Rin blinks rapidly a few times to clear the double vision she has of her master and fellow apprentice overlapping each other, and attempts to lift them from the strange mood that has fallen. Anyway, enough of that, she declares, a little more steady than before. I just remembered, have there been any updates on his medical report? I need make some notes on his physical condition I noticed weren't written down. She doesn't know how the medics handling such a high-profile case missed important things like musculature damage and closed tenketsu in his chakra network non-fatal afterthoughts that Tsunade had left in their care when the major injuries had been taken care of. But she'll be damned if small details like these would somehow be used against her teammate later on when politicians masquerading as shinobi came snooping for something to use to keep her teammate leashed. And she's not above verbally eviscerating the senior staff in charge of Kakashi's care when she or Shizen were off duty. The physical she managed to make Kakashi sit still for after dinner had been telling, and those oversights would not be tolerated. Shizen doesn't answer, expression unreadable. Before Rin can ask what's wrong, a nurse is shouting someone is coating down the hall and they are both once again lost in the chaos of running an understaffed hospital full of injured shinobi and civilians, minds occupied by vastly different things. His team is already waiting for him when he arrives at the training ground, the sun still high but sinking quickly to the horizon. And it's such a strange perspective to be the one late instead of Aito who has a smug grin on his face. The Uchiha takes great glee in calling, "You're late, Kakashi. What took you so long?" Rin punches him in the arm. "How was the evaluation?" Kakashi can only shrug and say, Ibiki hasn't changed a bit, but he knows they understand by the sympathetic wince he gets from them both. Well, Rin starts optimistically, at least this will keep the council off your back. Not enough to keep their guards from shadowing me, but at least they've stopped trying to antagonize me for the time being, Kakashi thinks. But he doesn't say any of this out loud. Before Aito can open his mouth and say something that'll get him another punch in the arm, an incredibly familiar voice bellows in the distance. "My eternal rival!" The springtime of youth has resurrected Dash. All three turn to see Asuma kick the crying beautiful green beast into a tree, cutting off the man's very loud and tearful declarations of youth and springtime. He's from a different world, guy, not back from the dead. Geez, he and Kurinai step onto the training grounds, looking relaxed and confident as they stroll up to the former team Minato with a sobered guy trailing behind them, still grinning but content to withhold the shouting for now. They look the same as last night, he thinks, maybe more well-rested than before. Or maybe that's because they're actually smiling instead of standing still as stoic observers. Aito, Rin, Kurinai greets warmly before looking at Kakashi with intense red eyes. She sounds unsure when she acknowledges, "Hataki-san?" Kakashi can feel their piercing stares, assessing and wary, and remembers a time, before he became human again instead of cold steel wrapped in blood, when they played together as children before starting the academy. The classes they shared for the short time he was in school, a lifetime of memories he has with them that they do not share. But they do know him, to an extent, and they look at him with something like old sadness and reminiscence, as if they are remembering the same things he is. He wonders if this is what it's like to be grieved instead of the griever. Kakashi flashes his signature smile and waves off her stiff formality. "Ma, just Kakashi is fine, Kurinai. I might be dead in this world but it's not like we weren't friends before. Asuma guy, good to see you." He falters at the stuttered silence that follows, glancing at his old team and their odd expressions, then back at his old friends' shocked ones. They recover admirably enough, but it's just a reminder that they hadn't seen him grow out of the arrogant child genius he'd always been. They didn't see the process that made him what he is now, brittle and fake and smiling for the world to see. Asuma recovers first, a genuine smile on his lips when he asks, "So, what's it like being here? Any different from your world besides the whole being dead thing?" Aito and Rin tense beside him but Kakashi doesn't hesitate. "I suppose? Some things are different, but it seems some things aren't meant to change," he answers cryptically with a shrug. It's almost funny to watch their reactions, catching the slightly disbelieving look that Kurinai gives Rin and Aito, the way Asuma has forgotten to take a drag of his lit cigarette, how Guy hasn't stopped scrutinizing him since he opened his mouth the first time. But Kakashi also doesn't miss the glinting metal bands adorning Asuma and Kurinai's fingers that he didn't see last night, matching and simple, and he's hit with another wave of nostalgia and loss that he isn't quite ready for. Asuma had been a reliable comrade and his death had been a huge blow to morale, but Kakashi had also lost a good friend that day, remembering a skinny, rebellious Chunin that choked on more cigarettes than he smoked, determined to grow out his scraggly beard and prove himself as more than a Kaige's son, who ran off to join the daimyo's royal guard to do just that. His funeral had been short and bleak, punctuated by the sounds of Ino and Chuji's endless crying, and Kakashi knows he will never forget the desolation on Shikamaru's face or look of despair that clouded Kurinai's beautiful red eyes that the idiot Sarutobi always waxed poems about when he drank too much. He's willing to bet their wedding was the opposite, beautiful and bright and filled with laughter and different tears. Their house too, soon to be brimming with the life of a beautiful, strong little girl, maybe more, that Shikamaru will gladly uncle for, who will be surrounded by their parents and their teams, people that will kill and die for her, Kurenai and Asuma's little miracle. The young Sarutobi whistles lowly, bringing Kakashi back to the present. You've really mellowed out in your old age, eh? And you ended up taller than Obito. Wasn't that the only thing he ever held over you? That and his ability to come up with terrible reasons why he's always late. Obito splutters indignantly. Hypocrite. Who was the one late for his meeting with Ibiki? Huh. And you made me late today. Hate won't let me live it down. Kakashi stares blandly at him, ignoring the confusion on Asuma's face and amusement on Rin's. I have no idea what you're talking about. How was class, by the way? Find all of Anko's pranks in time? Obito's face turns red. You dash. So, Rin cuts in, ignoring the bemused expressions on their peers' faces. What are you three doing out? It doesn't sound like a question. Kurenai smiles a bit guiltily. Would you believe me if I said I wanted to check on how Kiba's doing? Rin sighs. No, but if you must know, he's raising hell in his hospital room even with a broken leg and enough painkillers to down a horse. It took Shizen talking to him privately to settle him down for overnight observation. Kurenai winces sympathetically. For Kiba, no doubt, unsurprised. They lapse into silence, not quite comfortable but not yet awkward, because it seems even Obito and Guy are at a loss for words. Kakashi internally sighs. He is way too old for this shit. Thankfully, someone must hear his plea for escape because in a flash of yellow, Sensei is standing right beside them with a bright smile. Oh, he says in mild surprise as he looks to the other three jounin and accepts their polite bows of greeting. Asuma-kun, Guy-kun, Kurenai-kun, pleasure to see you three. I hope your teams are doing well. As well as they can be 5 days out from the village with Ino, and no onsens on the way, Asuma says dryly. Minato laughs, the lines on his face becoming slightly more prominent, and Kakashi wonders if he will ever not be in awe of how easily his sensei dissipates the tension in any situation, not at all blind to the glowing respect he can see in the eyes of his fellow jounin. It feels so much like Naruto's, admittedly louder, spirit he can't help but smile softly beneath his mask. Something squeezes in his chest like a vice because Naruto will never know what it's like to be smiled at like that. Minato eyes his team with good-natured suspicion. So what are you three up to? A spar? I would be most honored to have a glorious spar of youth with your beloved team, Hokage-sama. Guy says enthusiastically, sincerity lacing every word as he gives the indulgently amused Hokage a bright thumbs up. Kakashi looks on with a dull expression as his friend points at him rather dramatically and shouts, I, the beautiful green beast of Konoha, challenge you, my eternal rival, to a spar. His dismay must be more noticeable than he thought when Obito cackles at his expense and Asuma smirks around his cigarette, cracking his knuckles. Actually, you know what? I want to crack at him too. Kurenai rolls her eyes at the overly macho displays beside her. He's not a piñata, Asuma. Although, her eyes glint ominously, I'd like to see his skills as well. Kakashi is wholly unimpressed with the lot of them. Rin puffs up, the medic in her already picking up the discomfort that racks Kakashi's body from too little time recovering and too much emotional upheaval even after a full night of nightmares, rest, and lectures. I don't think so. Kakashi-kun still needs rest, his chakra levels are far too low. Actually, Kakashi interrupts, enjoying the way everyone's eyes snap to him with mix of wariness and anticipation. Why not make this a team spar? Obito, Rin, and I against Kurenai, Asuma, and his voice becomes dull, pointing at Guy who is busy doing several alternating one-handed vertical push-ups as warm-up with vigor, melting Rin's stern exterior with a snort. That. Minato coughs suspiciously into his fist, an amused smile tugging on his lips as he eyes the 6 of them, one looking bored and the other 5 looking hopeful. He sighs, wondering when he ended up raising a village of children, before an idea comes to him. Kushina wanted me to warn you not to be late for dinner, but I guess his grin is devilish when he offers, in that case, I'll supervise the match. Obito whoops loudly, yes. Team Minato, back together again. Are you sure, Hokage-sama? We don't want to keep you from anything important. Asuma asks, putting out his cigarette and incinerating the butt in his hand. Kakashi smirks, visible from beneath his mask, and sounds innocently concerned when he says placatingly, not worried about performance anxiety. Are you Asuma? I'm sure Minato-sensei would understand if you can't fight up to snuff in front of such an important audience. Another shocked silence before Obito bursts into raucous laughter, nearly doubling over where he stands, while Rin tries and fails to hide her laughter behind her hands. Kurenai looks scandalized for all of a minute before following suit. Minato's eyes dance with mirth, and Guy returns from his second warm-up, 20 laps around the training grounds on one hand and 1 foot. What? With energy to spare. Asuma swears and colors but a grin pulls at his lips, and Kakashi doesn't remember feeling this at ease in a while. Bastard, I just don't want Hokage-sama see his student get his ass kicked too badly. Whatever you say, Asuma. They split up and walk to opposite ends of the training grounds, anticipation stirring up the air as Minato finds a place to settle and watch the match. Kakashi turns to see both his teammates looking at him expectantly, and with a jolt, realizes that they expect him to take the lead. He takes it in stride and he knows they see his hesitation, but this is a chance for them to really relearn each other. He's only ever gotten to know them through training and missions and vice versa. He learned about them through their bodies. How Rin sometimes twisted a little too far to the left to protect a broken rib that healed wrong as a child and still makes her flinch from memory. How Aito can take beating after beating with a bloody grin but couldn't stand being tickled even a little bit. They know going for his mask is a sure way to get a broken bone whether he means to do it or not. He's been watching how they move, two around the kitchen holding dishes and silverware, across the rooftops with sure feet and steady breaths, and he never fails to notice the way they gravitate towards each other, like two planets constantly circling the other in a steady, never-ending cycle. His body aches because he can feel the pull too, faint and sometimes too subtle for him to resist, but he can't indulge himself in what-ifs that will never be. He's lost his chance twice, but these observations, as scarce and unreliable as they are enough for him to formulate a plan. After all, he doesn't need to know how they fight because he knows everything about their opponent. Their heads duck together to plan, and when they finally reemerge to begin, all three smiles are predatory. Asuma doesn't know why he's so nervous, it's just a spar. But it's a spar with a long-dead friend and widely lauded genius. In front of his wife and the Hokage. So, there's that. Kurinai's slight fingers are feather-light on his wrist before retreating, her amazing eyes glittering excitedly like jewels in the sunlight. Christ, no wonder Genma keeps ragging on him about being a sap with those kinds of thoughts. But he can't help that it's true. Think he's going to use his Sharingan? Kurinai asks, eyeing their opponents calculatingly. Neither of them bring up the story of a dead boy lost to the earth. Asuma shrugs, still a little weirded out at the thought of looking at his once classmate with one red and one gray eye. But he is curious to see how well Kakashi handles a Dijitsu that, by all accounts, should have left him half crazy from the massive information input and lack of bloodline to properly control it. Dunno, unless you think he's gonna be able to take Guy with half his depth perception. Because there's no doubt who Guy is going after right out of the gate. The Genjutsu mistress purses her lips and Asuma gets a little distracted. Normally I would say no. I mean, it's Guy. But this is Kakashi we're talking about. Remember when he won the junior shinobi contest before even entering the academy with a jutsu that we weren't taught until we were Chunin? No. Asuma stares at her, a little dumbfounded. You do? Kurinai pinks, shut up, I was there, okay? Hard to forget the kid younger than you who got mud in your hair. He snorts, yeah, well, we'll see in a bit, won't we? Gonna take Rin while I take Aito then? Kurinai rolls her eyes even as her lips pull into a small smirk. You're just scared of her Saban. Damn right he's scared of her Saban. Fine. Worst case scenario, Guy is busy with Kakashi for a bit while we figure out how to get past another Sharingan user and the second best healer in all of Konoha until he's done. Asuma watches as she absent-mindedly flicks her wrist, magnificent flowers illusionary blooming at her will, before they wilt and disappear just as quickly. A warm-up. He chuckles, don't let Shizen hear you say that. Besides, just cause Aito can see through illusions, doesn't mean he's any good at dispelling them. We'll do fine. He doesn't like to boast, but he's fairly confident he can hold his own against Aito the Kenjutsu master at least. With his trench knives imbued with wind chakra they're usually fairly even. And Kurinai always downplays her talent in Genjutsu when even Uchiha with activated Sharingan who specialize in it are terrified of her skill. Just keep the pressure on Rin, and he'll be too distracted to fire off any Katan Jutsu. And maybe if I'm nice, I'll let you beat Aito before I do. Kurinai winks, walking off to let Guy know the plan. Damn, he loves that woman. Give me a few minutes, I'll join in when the time is right. Strong and capable. That's Kakashi's first thought as he observes his teammates' practiced, easy movements, nearly thoughtless if not for their twitching fingers and quick looks. Rin is adept at using poison Sanban, it seems, her accuracy even more deadly than he remembers, and stays mid-range while Aito charges the front lines. His skill with the Tanto is unlike anything Kakashi has seen in years, not since a disastrous mission in Tetsu no Kuni where he was almost cut in half by a man who was just as dangerous with his katana, and pride swells in his chest to see his father's weapon gleaming fiercely in the sunlight. Kakashi can see where he would slip in seamlessly, a long-range ninjutsu master proficient at hand-to-hand and mid-range combat. Something tightens in his chest at the thought of them keeping his position despite the Kakashi of this world never living long enough to fill it, but he shakes off the ridiculous notion and calculates their opponent's next dozen moves before striking. Guy, for all his boisterous laughter and ridiculous challenges, has a mind as sharp as his skill and is no pushover, matching Kakashi in battle despite using almost nothing but physical attacks, and Kakashi can see Aito beginning to tire under the barrage of taijutsu attacks and Asuma's close-range trench knife even with the Sharingan activated and firing off as many Katan jutsus as he could with one hand. Rin does well enough against Kurinai's deadly genjutsu with Aito calling out warnings, red eyes bright and gleaming, and assists as much as she can by curving the worst of Asuma and Guy's combos with her poison Sanban that manage to slow them with a few good hits. But with Guy's speed, it would be easy for him to let Asuma take Aito head-on for a few moments and overwhelm Rin. Right now, they are outmatched. Kakashi has never believed in waiting for the perfect moment. He makes them. The shock is palpable when he reveals a spinning red eye and dispels several layers of the multi-layered genjutsu Kurinai has been weaving the whole time, when he knocks one of Asuma's trench knives out of his hands and tosses him into Aito's tender loving care, when he takes on Guy in his own specialty, all in a matter of heartbeats. He can't see his teammates' grins, but he's sure they are wide and bloodthirsty. The battle goes on, even on both sides now that his advantage of surprise is gone, but he can feel it in his bones that it is close to over. There are very few who can match Guy in speed, stamina, and skill. The Yondaime, Jiraiya, and maybe Itachi to name a few, but Kakashi has been fighting Guy for as long as he can remember. Fighting this guy is just like being home, feels like home, and it's just one of few things in this world that puts him at ease with its familiarity. The duck-dodge-weave counter of fighting the man that has stayed so faithfully and stubbornly by his side for so many years. Guy grins, bright and victorious, and Kakashi nearly does the same because he knows what's coming. They separate for a heartbeat before clashing again in a fury, and Kakashi is happy to find Guy's speed has not diminished with this. Kakashi's death has found the will to move on and become great even without an eternal rival to constantly measure up to. But Kakashi knows his style inside and out, can copy each movement flawlessly even without the Sharingan, and despite exhaustion pulling at his muscles and the fractures he can feel lining his bones, it isn't long before he's able to find an opening. After all, while there are plenty of Uchiha alive in this world, Guy has no reason to develop a fighting style against them specifically. Hand seals flash too quickly for anyone who happens to be watching to comprehend while Saban fly through the air and fire roars in the sky, and in the next moment, Guy is trapped underground with only his head just above it, spitting out grass and struggling against the many hard slabs of rock Kakashi has reinforced around him with lightning while Kakashi is holding a kunai at his throat. At the same time, Rin and Obito switch places in one flawless movement, and it ends with Rin disabling Asuma's limbs with quick, precise jabs at his pressure points while Obito's eyes cut through Kurinai's genjutsu and holds his tanto at her belly. The match is abruptly over and Minato steps into the center of the silent field, arm raised. The Yondaime's smile is as bright as the sun. Winner, Team Minato. Oi Kashi, what are you doing up? Early, Obito slurs tiredly, rubbing his eye and yawning. Kakashi blinks up from the scroll he'd been studying. Idiot, you should be resting, he thinks. If it sounds almost fond in his head, he doesn't want to imagine what it would have sounded like had he said it out loud. Fond or no, it doesn't make the thought any less true. The Uchiha had just returned from a 3-day A rank that required more stamina than finesse, a perfect fit for the master swordsman, and had been sleeping off his fatigue from nearly an entire day of hard sprinting since getting back to the apartment 3 hours ago. Kakashi had been the one to dress his wounds since they were fairly superficial and Rin was more than likely sleeping, and he knew the Uchiha would be sore in the morning without proper sleep. He quietly snorts to himself when he realizes he's starting to sound like Sakura. Just some light reading, Kakashi murmurs, the pull of sleep tempting him as well, but guilt swims in his gut at the thought of dreaming when he should be figuring out a way home. He can't tell Obito that though. He can't tell anyone. Obito somehow manages to squint skeptically at him even with his eyes closed. You sure? Not another nightmare? Kakashi smiles softly beneath his mask. Not tonight. Obito just nods slowly, eyes closed as he wanders to the kitchen for a glass of water. Too trusting. Kakashi turns his eyes back to the second piece of parchment he's been taking notes on, half encrypted with a mix of his own personal shorthand and bits and pieces he'd learned in A and BU, with the other half an amalgamation of half-formed words, all written in his messy scrawl. The multiverse or meta-universe is the hypothetical set of finite and infinite possible universes comprises of everything that exists, the entirety of space, time, matter, energy, and the physical laws and constants that describe them. Some believe all these possible worlds exist at the same time and are as real as this world. He knows some of the theories already, on alternate universes. He'd done a lot of research for Minato even without being asked when his teacher had first begun learning the Hiraishin, and he noticed spacetime manipulation seemed to have a lot of ties to parallel worlds, but he never really thought of it beyond pure theory. After all, what use did he have with different universes when the ability to travel to them was impossible outside of fairy tales and made-up abilities whispered between children? That was before. The fact that his borrowed eye can transport things to a different dimension has not escaped his notice. And of course he's also heard of the butterfly effect. But he knew dwelling on what-ifs would drag him into a pit he wouldn't be able to escape from, so he never let himself imagine a reality different from his own. Now, though, he has to see it played out before him. It hurts, of course it does, because this world confirms what he's always suspected, that he should be dead. But despite all his loved ones still breathing and living, his death doesn't explain why the Uchiha are still roaming the earth, or why there is no overhanging dread of war in the village. He's intercepted a few of Jiraiya's spied birds at the expense of a few new scratches and dirty looks from his Niken, and found that only 4 of the 9-tailed beasts have been captured. By the time Naruto had returned from his trip with Jiraiya, 6 of the 9-tailed beasts had been obtained, not including Gaara, who'd been kidnapped mere weeks later, and the Akatsuki had been brought out from the shadows as a threat to the 5 nations and not just a highly secretive mercenary group. There are too many questions and not enough answers. Obito shuffles out of the kitchen back towards his bedroom with a wave, and Kakashi can't help the exasperated affection he feels wash over him for a moment, chasing away the building frustration. With another tired glance at his notes, he sighs and carefully rolls up the 2 scrolls he'd swiped from the forbidden section of the archives, knowing he only has until dawn before he needs to return them in fear of Kushina getting to her shift and realizing someone has tampered with her seals responsible for cataloging the library seals that had taken him nearly the entire time since he'd woken up here the first time to decipher. let alone modify without alerting her at first contact. It doesn't help that she has some nasty traps set up that he's had to disable and learn to re-engage, even guarding unrestricted books. Kakashi knows because 7 clones went out in a puff of smoke and pain that way. Even with all that he's gathered so far and finding a few puzzling pieces clicking into place, he needs more information, which means he needs to approach Minato soon. There's only so much he can do with limited access to anything when at one time he had unlimited access to everything, and he knows his teacher has some idea of what happened to him, as well as probably Jiraiya, who's been strangely absent. He knows why he's so slow to figure out a way home though, because the thought of ending this living dream makes his blood turn to ice. But the alternative, Kakashi thinks, watching the notes he memorized burned to nothing in his hand, is much worse, because the longer he stays here, the longer he's unable to help his students and or protect his village from an insurmountable foe, and that thought fills his mouth with ash. Minato's hand twitches when Kakashi appears from a dark corner of the office, footsteps now audible and lazy gaze stuck on whatever book he swiped from Kushina's shelves this time, and the blonde has to silently sign his ANBU to back down from their offensive positions. They never appear from where they are hidden, but their chakra buzzes faintly before becoming an indistinct hum once more. Minato hides a smirk. His guards hadn't been this unsettled in years and says dryly, "Nice of you to drop by, Kakashi. Only a half hour late this time." Kakashi snaps the book closed and I smiles. Anything for my favorite sensei. Where many shinobi would salute or straighten up to attention despite Minato's relaxed rule, Kakashi slouches where he stands, and Minato almost worries his student would become a puddle if he became any more boneless. A guard to his far left bristles at the lack of deference to the Hokage, undetectable to most, and Minato has to bite back another laugh as Kakashi surreptitiously flashes them an unflattering sign. "I'd be flattered if you had more than one sensei," Minato deadpants, "but now that you're here, we can get started." He flicks his eyes towards the door, a silent command. Root doesn't hesitate, so used to obedience, while his ANBU hesitate for half a second before following, loyal and wary. He flares his chakra and seals light up around the room, the blue light almost eye-wateringly bright, before the room is back to being bathed in just sunlight. Kakashi studies the still faintly glowing brushwork appreciatively. "Should I be worried?" "Depends," Minato grins, "on how much you hate being a teacher." Kakashi's visible eye widens the slightest bit before blandly stating, "If you make me work at the academy, those brats won't last an hour." Minato laughs because he knows it's true. No, I'd never do that to them or you. And I know you already have a genin team of your own." The words are harder to say than he expects, and Kakashi shoves his hands in his pockets. This is the first time anyone in Team Minato has really mentioned Kakashi's true origins directly. "But I was thinking something a little more covert." Kakashi's shoulders lower a fraction of an inch. "What did you have in mind?" "I would like you to train new recruits." "NBU specifically?" Kakashi doesn't bat an eye, as unflappable as ever, but he is still Minato's student, and the blonde can see that gray gaze sharpening. Brilliant mind, no doubt already thinking of a dozen reasons why Minato would ask him such a thing while simultaneously planning the most effective and gruesome training exercises for his new bunch of rookies. "Need a little help with the weeding?" he asks casually, and Minato's mind races with the implications. He nods. "You could say that." He watches his student closely, almost missing the flash of hesitation that crosses his masked features. The Kakashi Minato knew was never comfortable with the leaps of faith he used to take, decisions that seemed irrational with so little evidence, passing Team 7 when it was clear they had no teamwork to speak of, believing in a disgrace, a failure, and a no-name clan girl. One short spar predominantly fought with taijutsu hardly counts as enough information to make such request. This Kakashi merely tilts his head to the side in idle curiosity. "And you think I'm the man for the job?" "I know you are," Minato says earnestly. The Jounin rocks back on his heels and looks at him with an unreadable expression before revealing, "I was recruited into Root for a short time." Minato's breathing stops for a split second, blue eyes a little wider than before. Kakashi doesn't give anything away, in expression or body language, but something about him feels repentant. "It was after you died and Sarutobi-sama retook the title. I wasn't in a good place. I know it's no excuse, but I was vulnerable to Danzo's machinations, and it wasn't until I was ordered to assassinate the Sandaime that I realized what Danzo really is." His gaze, which had drifted to the view of the village in the brilliant sunlight, snaps back to Minato. "Do you still think I'm your best option? Do you still trust me?" Minato doesn't have to think on it too much because he already knew this was a possibility. Kakashi had never said outright, but he spoke of Danzo with such silky venom that Minato could tentatively piece together a picture of their true relationship. It makes his knuckles ache with how badly he wants to find the old councilman and remind him just who he's dealing with. Instead, he asks, "Were you loyal to Sarutobi Hiruzen?" Kakashi's answer is immediate and heartfelt, to the very end. "Would you die to protect this village and her people?" "In a heartbeat." "Then I do think you're right for the job," Minato says confidently. At Kakashi's surprised look, he explains, "You said it yourself, Kakashi. You've experienced how persuasive Danzo can be, how he thinks and what his methods are. You've seen how Root operates. Over a decade in ANBU also means you can distinguish between his men and ours, and you have the skills to properly prepare them." The Yondaime stands from his seat and walks around his desk, stopping in front of the silver-haired jounin with an earnest expression. I need to know who I can trust and who is in danger. Hands come up to rest on Kakashi's tense shoulders, and he puts every ounce of sincerity and truth he can into his words. I trust you, Kakashi. I trust your judgment, and I trust that you only want what's best for the village. Rude may have had a purpose, once upon a time, but now, he doesn't need to say they're choking the life out of his village with their presence. That Danzo's steadily growing power brings more uneasiness than comfort. That he knows of Danzo's schemes beyond their borders even if he can't prove let alone stop any of them, not without help. Kakashi must see even a little of the desperation Minato tries to hide, a gloved hand coming up to rest on one of his forearms reassuringly. I understand, Minato-sensei. He steps back, out of reach, and kneels with the first over his heart. Minato knows better than to stop him, so he stands back straight, listening with a somber heart as his first student and one of the most broken, loyal shinobi he knows pledges his life to the will of the Hokage once more, and lets the solemn words ring down to his very bones as the feeling of lightning crackles across his skin. I, Hatake Kakashi, do so solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Hokage and all his successors. That I will be loyal and defend him to the utmost of my power against all conspiracies and attempts which shall be made against his person, title, or dignity. I surrender my autonomy and my life to him, for I have no heart but the heart Konohagakure. I have no will but the will of my Hokage. They won't leave him alone. Yo, Kakashi! Where ya headed? Kakashi resists a groan and calculates his chances of escaping 3 jounin. With this bunch, not very high. It seems now that they've seen him and talked to him, sparred with him and his team little less than a week ago, they won't let him be. He can understand wanting a rematch. Their fight less than 5 days ago had been fairly one-sided, with Asuma and Kurinai healing from substantial wounds acquired in a mission a few days before. And he knows that Jujutsu will only work once on Guy, but he doesn't really understand why they've been accosting him at every turn whether or not he's around Obito or Rin. They only steer clear when he's hanging around Obito's apartment because of all the traps he's added and upgraded to keep them out. But it seems no matter where he is, he's never alone for more than an hour. At the memorial stone, browsing a bookstore, standing on the Hokage monument, they never ask him why he stands on a stone head that doesn't exist, and he doesn't tell them the best view of the sunset is on Tsunade's nose. Nowhere is safe. It definitely puts a damper on his information gathering because, just his luck, he's constantly surrounded by the elite of the village and still under surveillance by Root and 2 ANBU guards. Minato's extremely reluctant acquiescence to the council. That doesn't mean he's unsuccessful, of course, but he's been able to do far less than anticipated, like possibly sneak into one of Orochimaru's abandoned labs to see what kind of research the snake has been up to, or break into Danzo's office and maybe find Tenzo and Sai. Just the thought of the treacherous old crow keeping his talons in either of them for so long makes his jaw clench tightly, chest alight with a cold fire. But because he has to stay relatively on the good side of the council and keep his status as supervised and not change to threat, he's not allowed to run from his guard's sights like he so badly wants to and slip into the shadows where very, very few can find him. His highly suspicious mind tells him it's a ploy that his former childhood friends would be so determined to befriend him, but the rest of him who has fought beside them for years and years knows they are just too nosy for their own good and genuinely, for some reason, want to be around him. He idly wonders if they've suffered some brain damage since his death because he doesn't recall ever being this popular before retiring from ANBU. When he'd mentioned this to Rin, she had laughed. What did you expect? She'd asked. Of course they want to be around you. You're the reason we all trained so hard, you know. No, he hadn't known. Rin's smile had been wistful and sad when she'd said, all of us were determined to get stronger after what happened to our team. You were like the goal to reach in order to become one of the best. If the golden boy of our generation didn't make it through the war, what chance did the rest of us have to survive without working ourselves to the bone? That was understandable, and he'd vaguely recalled their attempts at being his friend after Obito then Rin then Minato died. But here? Where he'd been dead longer than he'd ever been alive. What was the point if he might not even stick around long enough for those friendships to fully form? Seeing you now, she'd continued, is like starting again where we left off. They want to test themselves against you but also learn from you, be your friend again like before. Like the Canopy Bridge mission never happened, had gone unsaid. He hadn't said anything in return, mind working overtime to figure out another motive because that doesn't make sense, he doesn't understand. She looked at him then, puzzlingly sad, with an echo of Kushina's voice in her words when she'd said with a note of exasperation and fondness, you really have no idea how much influence you have, do you? They hadn't said anything more, after that, content to walk beside each other like they hadn't done in 18 years. Kurinai and Guy are the worst offenders since they're not allowed to spar with him again until the proficiency matches in 3 days' time, also because of Kurinai's highly curious and intellectual nature, and Guy because, well, he's Guy. Asuma is a little more sedate in his offers to go to lunch or have a light spar or just sit quietly in a tea house while Kakashi reads one of the mystery novels swiped from Kushina's bookshelf, but he's still a constant presence as well. He's also noticed some of the more forward ridiculous jounin poking around when they think he doesn't notice, like Enko, who likes to stare with a wide grin when he passing by her favorite dango shop, twirling an empty stick threateningly, Or hate, who's taken to watching Kakashi's spars with Asuma with a critical eye despite probably needing a nap to get over his most recent cold. He hasn't seen much of the clan heads because of his avoidance of anywhere crowded, but that's probably a good thing since it means he hasn't had to lay eyes on Uchiha Fugaku or his family since arriving. However, the lack of time alone is in a word grating, and this time, it's all three of them tailing him as he slips seamlessly through the less crowded streets of Konoha, so there's practically zero chance of escape. Don't you have students to be teaching? Bad omen. Asuma grins around his cigarette, but there's a little pride and a little wistfulness when he says, don't be like that. Besides, they're all grown up now, always complaining that they're adults and can handle missions without a chaperone. Makes us senseis feel unwanted. Kakashi is fairly sure that's just the beginning. Just wait, in a week's time, half the forces will decimate it. You'd understand if you had students of your own. Kurenai smiles, good-natured and unaware. Kakashi would be a most inspiring teacher. And our wonderful students could have youthful spars. Guy declares. Kakashi is a little touched by his friend's words even when Asuma mutters more like make perfect little Kakashi drones under his breath. Kurenai just looks speculative at the idea. They don't know it, but technically, he's had dozens. Rookies and new team members in ANBU and Root including Tenzo and Itachi and Yugago, then the 3 teams of Genin he failed before passing Team 7. And, he thinks with a touch of nostalgia, he was a sort of pseudo-sensei to Kurenai's team when she was forced to retire due to her pregnancy, became another role model for Team Guy to follow, and protected Asuma's students with his life more than once. He was their sensei just as much as they were Naruto, Sai, and Sakura's senseis. In the way the saying goes, it takes a village to raise a child like it takes a dozen jounin to teach one team of genin. Kakashi says none of this and just hums non-committally while Guy breaks out into a loud monologue about his own team, proud tears streaming down his face. As totally going to snap. Niji has become a truly remarkable jounin. He is leading his 3rd team mission outside of the village in 2 weeks' time, Guy says, and it's not hard to see past the ridiculous, over-the-top pride and hear how truly happy for his student he is. Asuma shakes his head. Damn, they grow up fast, don't they? Kakashi sighs in resignation as they practically manhandle him into a small snack shop where they proceed to order anything fried or sweet on the menu, his 2 most hated types of foods. By Asuma's smug little grin, the assholes know it too. They chatter about their teams, occasionally getting a sentence from Kakashi, but his attention is elsewhere. Completely unnatural, supposed to be dead and stay that way. Going to bring more trouble than he's worth. He glances towards the small flower stand across the street where 3 chunin are currently gossiping. He knows who they're talking about because they keep, conspicuously, looking over at them, and despite his friend's best attempts at distracting him, they can obviously hear almost every word as well. Aren't get near him know what they say. Kakashi's had enough. There's only so much recon he can do and rumors he can sort as fact or fiction himself before he slowly starts to lose his mind, and he has too many important things to keep track of for this to become a serious distraction. This isn't the first, nor will it be the last, time he's heard those words tossed around, and something about them doesn't ring quite right. He snatches the basket of fries the other 3 are sharing, getting their abrupt attention. He directs the question to all of them, but his attention is only on one. Why are they staring at me like I'm the Shinigami-sama himself? And it's not because I'm supposed to be dead, that's old news. Asuma is a seasoned jounin and the son of a kage, and Guy's ridiculous training has given him complete control over every muscle in his body. They don't react, not in the obvious way he's looking for. Despite a few years under her belt, Kurenai is the least experienced, and therefore the easiest to read. The twitch in her fingers and the flickering across her unique red eyes is enough of a giveaway, and she knows it. She sighs a bit guiltily, glaring at a few of the oblivious chunin who continue to gossip despite the attention of 4 jounin. It's just a superstition. Kakashi raises an eyebrow expectantly. Asuma clears his throat and says with a shrug, people nowadays tend to think geniuses are cursed. Hang around one long enough and they'll either die or go mad well before their time, maybe drag some people down with them. He grunts when Kurenai elbows him sharply in the ribs, but he doesn't take back the words and just reaches for another fry. There may be some truth to that, Kakashi thinks wryly. Kurenai lowers her voice. It's because all the prodigies in the last few generations haven't exactly survived past their 20s. After you, she winces, but soldiers on. After you died in that mission, it seems every genius promoted after you is doomed to a similar fate. Uchiha Shursui was considered the strongest Uchiha of his time, but he disappeared at the height of his fame, a few years after the Kanabi Bridge mission. Fugaku-sama's oldest son, Itachi-san, was thought to be even more prodigious than you. Kakashi almost smiles at the incredulity in her tone. And now he's become a prematurely retired gardener who hardly even speaks to his family. Nothing's happened to Shikamaru-kun or Niji-kun, thankfully, but Itachi's younger brother, Sasuke. Kurenai cuts herself off, looking solemn, lips pressed into a thin line. Something cold grips Kakashi's heart, but he doesn't let it show. Younger brother a genius too? The slash of Asuma's mouth is grim. Was. Kid graduated 2 years early, rookie of the year. Not quite as quick as you or Itachi, but still pretty damn impressive with the new regulations in place. He shakes his head and Kakashi can almost hear what a shame. First mission outside the village, and the entire team is slaughtered by a missing nin. Shursui was already an older brother figure to Itachi. I'm pretty sure losing his younger brother is what pushed him over the edge. Ran a long string of suicidal S-ranks before just quitting altogether and cutting ties with his family. Guy, uncharacteristically grim and quiet up to this point, frowned sadly with a touch of old loss, the kind that isn't personal but still felt deeply. Itachi-kun's youth has been dampened by the tragic loss of his most precious younger brother. Kurenai nods and continues solemnly. Shursui's death put a huge strain on the Uchiha. On top of their constant spats with the Hyuga clan and distrust in the council, Asuma shoots her a warning look this time that she ignores, now both of Fugaku-sama's sons unable or unwilling to take up the title. Obito's practically the next head of the clan even though he's a branch member. And as much as they would love an Uchiha as Minato's successor, it's unlikely he'll be able to become Hokage if he's slated to be the next clan head. Kakashi finishes woodenly, mouth on autopilot. They call it the fall of the gifted, someone butts in. However, Kakashi doesn't really pay attention to the words, hasn't really hear anything beyond slaughtered. White noise fills his ears, and on instinct, he identifies the speaker as Shirani Ginma, Tokubetsu Jounin, XANBU, extremely capable all ninja art forms, part of the Hokage's personal guard and able to use the Hiraishin in tandem with his two fellow guards Reidu and Tatami. Something in him recognizes Ginma is not a threat, but it still takes a moment for Kakashi to lock down on the horrible, uncontrollable thought of I can kill him in 30 seconds and bring himself back to the present where the other three are watching him with concern and, even more so, wariness. The white noise fades and he hides away the ugliness festering inside him that a few simple words are able to unleash. It takes a moment but he manages to sound normal, even to his own ears, when he remarks offhandedly, not very creative with the names, are they? Kakashi doesn't miss Ginma's sharp-eyed stare, or the way he deliberately keeps his senban on the left side of his mouth, the side closest to Kakashi. You could say that. Typical Ginma, Kakashi mentally sighs. One part of him is relieved that someone is still wary around him when it seems the rest of the village is happy to have another genius among the ranks, and the rest of him already trying to figure out how to get on Ginma's good side quickly or at least avoid getting on his bad side. Even though they differ in their personal lives where Kakashi is, used to be, distant and unwelcoming, Ginma has always been able to draw people in with his laid-back nature and sometimes inappropriate humor. They are a lot alike in the ways that matter. Composed, calm, and as shrewd as they come. Those traits are why they made such a great team in ANBU. Here though, where he and Ginma's camaraderie forged in blood and shadows is absent, where Ginma doesn't know of Kakashi's trust in him to protect Minato-sensei as part of his personal guard, Kakashi now knows what it's like to be under that eagle-like gaze. It's not pleasant and dampens the acidic taste of panic in the back of his throat with bitterness. Ginma shrugs with false nonchalance. I would have called it something a little catchier. Curse of the Uchiha would be pretty accurate since all this crap seems to happen around that family, starting with Obito. Ginma. Kurenai chides, eerie red eyes finally off of Kakashi. Ginma grins unabashedly at Kurenai's ire and Guy's disapproving frown, but Kakashi ignores the rest of their conversation, mind spinning with the information already given. If Sasuke is dead, he needs to get himself under control. If that simple thought is enough to knock the wind from him, then Kakashi has to start digging deeper into his former students' blackened files, like he should have been doing all along. Kakashi is sure that that part is a secret from the rest of the village, otherwise the Uchiha would not live idly as their heirs' records are wiped from history. A chilling thought occurs to him. Does Obito know? There are very few places he can get answers, and something in him twists at the thought of not being able to completely trust his sensei or his teammates. As he listens with half an ear as his fellow jounin bicker about where to go for lunch, he plans. Minato, still watching the place his student had just disappeared from with a heavy heart, when his own sensei decides to appear. Why the long face, kid? Not happy to see me? Jiraiya teases. Minato huffs a laugh, shaking off the remnants of solemnity from earlier even as Kakashi's oath still lingers in his mind. Why would you ever think that? Humph. So how's the brat doing? Minato rolls his eyes at his mentor and says with an exasperated smile, he's not exactly a brat anymore, sensei. He's 30. Shodai's balls, all his students are adults, and doesn't that thought make him feel old? And he's doing well, considering the circumstances. Jiraiya makes an inquisitive noise as he takes a seat like he owns the office. Circumstances? Like him being dead? Or Obito being alive? His gaze sharpens, or something else? The problem with dealing with the Sannin, Minato mentally groans, is that for all their strange quirks and ability to seem mostly harmless, they are the shrewdest and most unforgiving shinobi he's ever dealt with. Minato rubs his face tiredly. All three, but mainly Obito. Survivor's guilt, Jiraiya surmises. He's not wrong, but it barely scratches the surface of what Minato knows as the whole story. Just the thought of what his first student has gone through is enough to make him want to drag the young jounin back to his home where he and Kushina could dote on him despite Kakashi's aversion to that kind of affection. Hell, that's what they've been doing, and yet nothing they do or say seems to be able to completely wipe away the haunted look that sometimes comes over his student's face. Any news on Danzo? Or the Akatsuki? Minato asks, and he knows it's not his smoothest transition, but he doesn't want to inadvertently reveal anything his student wants to keep private. Besides, after hearing Kakashi's story, he wants to put down any threat that lurks in Konoha as soon, and as viciously, as possible. Jiraiya notices, of course, but doesn't press. Same as usual, for the most part. None of my contacts have noticed anything different about that old goat's routine, which is boring as all hell, so either he's good at covering his tracks or he's preparing for something far in the future. They both know the latter is far more likely. How many more root have been integrated into NBU? The yondaime tries not to let his weariness show, but it's a fruitless attempt. Half a dozen. This month. Jiraiya grimaces and Minato wants to do the same, and coincidentally, those loyal to me are being killed off on missions at an alarming rate. He resists the urge to lay his head down on his desk. I only have a handful I can truly trust anymore. Any solutions? Minato purses his lips. I have a few ideas. I'll let you know how they work out. The Sannin grunts. Well, at least Danzo didn't antagonize Fugaku during that meeting last week, because he was too busy staring at Kakashi like one of his potential recruits. Minato thinks acidically. That one-eyed snake would have to go through Minato's dead body before getting to his student. None of this is new, unfortunately. Shimura Danzo has been a problem for years, a real threat for going on a decade when Root truly started becoming a problem, but one Minato has had trouble solving. Danzo's political power is only second to his military might, and only Minato's inner circle of trustworthy shinobi know just how dire the situation is becoming. Constantly undermining the Uchiha is just one of his methods of gaining leverage with other clans, namely the Hyuga, and causing general civil unrest through the military police force. Minato knows he's the direct cause because of his refusal to even entertain any of Danzo's horrifying whims, something the Sandaime, his soul rest in peace, used to do to placate his former teammate. There's not much we can do about him for now, Minato, Jiraiya says placidly. As for the Akatsuki, the info you passed on to me all panned out. Minato maintains an innocent facade in the face of his teacher's narrow-eyed stare. Turns out the leaders of Amigekyo, identities still unknown, are definitely involved with Akatsuki. I haven't been able to get in and confirm for myself, but my informant Inkusa's been keeping a close eye on who goes in and out. Minato opens his mouth to protest before Jiraiya raises a hand. I know, don't go tame because of the rain, yada yada yada. I'm not an idiot, kid. And I'm being even more cautious than usual because someone is being a worrywart. Minato pouts at Jiraiya's amused tone. Excuse me if I want to keep my and my son's teacher from kicking the bucket too soon. Yeah, well, you're still 100 years too young to worry about me, squirt. Jiraiya stretches and rises to his feet. Anyway, that's pretty much all I could get from such a short trip out of the village. Naruto should be back soon. He's been working real hard on completing the Rasengan, and I know he's gonna get it soon. Jiraiya shakes his head. I swear, that kid is gonna surpass both of us at this rate. That's amazing. Minato grins proudly as his teacher moves to the door. You and Tsunadeheim are coming to dinner later, right? We have a surprise guest joining us. Jiraiya flaps a hand at him. Yeah, wouldn't want to get that hot-blooded wife of yours worked up. Before he opens the door to leave, Jiraiya looks back at him and the blonde straightens in his seat at the severity in his teacher's face. Can we trust him? Jiraiya asks. Minato knows who he's talking about, knows not to take offense even as he bristles the slightest bit reactively. I read Ibiki's evaluation right after their session. Traumatized doesn't even begin to cover it, Minato. And I know there are a hell of a lot of things you aren't telling me about the boy. Do you think he's stable enough to be brought into this? Jiraiya didn't get to where he is now by being a thoughtless fool. Minato presses his lips in a thin line. He's thought about this since they first found Kakashi, and after spending time with him, getting to know him all over again, hearing the sobering promise made in this very office not even an hour ago, he knows without a shadow of a doubt what his answer is. I trust him with my life. Jiraiya watches him for a long, scrutinizing movement before breaking out into a grin and disappearing. Kakashi has thought this before and reiterates it to himself now, but his teammates have uncanny timing. Kakashi! Come on, we're gonna be late for dinner. Kakashi has never been so relieved to hear that loud voice. Anko pouts beside him. I just got here. Obito, can't you leave your boyfriend with us for the night? I know, bring him to poker night. Obito makes a face at her as he and Rin reach their table where Kakashi is unfortunately surrounded by twice the number of shinobi than earlier with Asuma, Kurenai, Ginma, and Ebisu to his left, and Guy, Reidu, and Enko to his right. A few Chunin, Kotetsu and Izumo, had stopped by earlier under the guise of speaking to Ebisu about a mission detail when in reality they wanted a chance to goggle at him up close. They've mostly been pestering him about his skills and if he thinks he's going to win his exhibition matches in the coming days, which is ridiculous because first, the matches will be called to a halt when the Hokage is satisfied, second, why would he say anything about his abilities in front of the very people he's going to fight, even though he has an advantage over them, but details, and third, of course he's going to win all of them. He very carefully doesn't look at Enko's bare neck when she asks about the craziest thing she's done in his world. Rin shrugs, but there's a devious tilt to the medic's lips. I guess, unless you want to be the one to tell the red-hot habanero that. The redhead's fierce reputation still serves her well. Enko slumped with a pout with no further objections. Kakashi smoothly extracts himself from the table, hardly jostling a single glass as he stands beside his teammates, and leaves more than enough money to pay for the booze he didn't drink, and a nice tip for the poor bartender. The sooner they leave, the better. It makes him itch, being around so many people for so long. Well, I can't say this has been fun. Stop following me. It's obvious the others don't really know how to take that until Asuma grins. No can do. Kurenai smirks, arms crossed. You'll have to do better than that if you want to get rid of us that badly. Kakashi, your humor is truly youthful. Guy laughs boisterously, reaching for a glass and not noticing Genma quickly switch it with water. Kakashi sighs, intentionally sounding put out and garnering a few chuckles from some of the others who have slowly started to relax in his presence. Then I'll have think of something good, won't I? He sends a lazy wave their way as he, Aito, and Rin leave the establishment. Bunch of alcoholics. Aito mutters under his breath. They're only halfway to Sensei's house when he catches Rin's third sideways glance. He looks at her questioningly. What is it? She eeps in about faces, but it's already obvious to him and Aito that something has been on her mind since leaving, since the match really. Her shoulders slump, sullen at being caught, but it would be a cold day in hell before Kakashi didn't feel people sneaking a peek at his face. I'm just surprised, I guess. I didn't think you'd ever get along with our old classmates like that. Were you close in Yoam before? Kakashi doesn't miss her hesitation, but he also doesn't comment. He knows who she's talking about, and he doesn't say that those three are the reason for his sanity, that they care enough about him and his health even after his superior attitude as a child and cold one as a teenager to go directly to the Hokage and demand that he be taken out of ANBU because it was destroying him. Asuma was like the annoying, slightly older cousin he never wanted, always so relaxed and uncaring when Kakashi's temper sometimes snapped. Kurenai, the most skittish of the three at first, matched him wit for wit and never lets him get away with his usual bullshit. And Guy had been a lifeline he hadn't known he needed, the only one he regularly kept in contact with even when he tried so hard to cut everyone and everything but his duty out of his life. Guy's stubbornness beats his by miles, and he's never been more grateful for that. They were the first ones to really give a damn about him since Sensei died and the first ones to welcome him in their inner circle. How can he explain that? Years of nights out drinking and playing card games and non-NBU missions flash through his mind. He shrugs. They're annoying, but they're good friends. Dinner is awkward. Damn it, Minato. Kushina knows her husband means well, but sometimes the blonde could be very short-sighted. Can he help her? She usually loved him for it. But today she wants nothing more than to drag him out of the apartment by his ear and knock some sense into him. She and Mikoto are able to chatter easily, years of close friendship somewhat able to mend the heartbreak the Uchiha matriarch feels when entering Naruto's home, a Naruto without Sasuke at his side. But Uchiha Fugaku is a different story. Dinner had been a disaster from the get-go when the first thing Fukaka had said to Kakashi was, "Do you plan on stealing another one of my family's eyes or is one enough?" The room had fallen dead silent in shock, but before Aito or Rin could attack in outrage, Kakashi had blinked and deadpanned. You think I want another one? This one gives me enough trouble. Tsunade had to punch Jiraiya through a wall to shut up his loud cackling. Fugaku now sits in stiff silence beside his wife, only opening his mouth to thank Minato and Kushina for their hospitality like any good clan head would and give a short greeting to his young, distant nephew Aito. He barely acknowledges Jiraiya and Tsunade and doesn't bother looking at either Rin or Kakashi for the rest of the meal, which in turn only makes Aito even more uncomfortable and Tsunade irritable. Shizen would have been a welcome addition, but after Rin had nearly shattered a glass at just the mention of her, Kushina decides her absences is probably for the best. I need to invest in cheaper dishes, she thinks morosely. Thankfully, Jiraiya's charisma and Minato's amiable personality are able to get the rest of the table to talk. The Toad Sage's teasing leads to Tsunade ignoring him in favor of discussing something important with Rin, while Minato sighs and rolls his eyes at Aito for trying and failing to swipe food off of Kakashi's plate. Kakashi even manages to distract his teammate from glaring kunai at the Uchiha clan head with questions about his Kenjutsu school curriculum. There is some tension hanging over the table, more so than usual when Minato or Kushina invite the Uchihas over for dinner, but she's not quite sure who it's from. She has an idea though. Well, I'll go get dessert, Kushina announces when it's obvious the atmosphere won't improve after a full belly. Half the table looks at her imploringly, but her eyes zoom in on one person. Kakashi-kun. Come help your Nasen get dessert. Hi, Kakashi says sedately, rising gracefully from his seat and following her to the kitchen. The dining room is silent for a moment before Mikoto, bless her heart, politely and genuinely asks how Rin is doing, and noise picks up again. Kushina sighs in relief. Didn't expect to have a few extra guests? Kakashi asks, but he sounds amused. Kushina glares at him before shaking her head. Let's just say Minato's a genius in foreign diplomacy but terrible with personal relationships. Took the goof nearly 6 years to tell me he liked me, so I'm not surprised he didn't realize this would be a disaster. Sounds like Minato-sensei. Kakashi nods. He's lucky he's lovable, Kushina says, grinning to herself as she pulls the cooled mochi out of the freezer. By the way, if you want to borrow a book from the archives, you could just ask. Kakashi doesn't even have the courtesy to look contrite, only smiling guilelessly and asking, which seal gave me away. Kushina hums to cover how impressed she is. Well, you got past the primary and secondary perimeter seals on the bookshelves well enough, and you reconfigured the main complex as well as I usually do it, so I didn't even notice it had been tampered with in the first place. She grins smugly. Just missed the location tracking seals I placed on the scrolls next to the ones you took. Those were the ones that told me something had been removed within their set parameters. Kakashi blinks in honest surprise before huffing an incredulous laugh. I didn't even think of that. The redhead tilts her head, eyeing him seriously, arms crossed and leaning against the counter by her hip. You know, Kakashi-kun, you might not have Minato's knack for seals, but you pick up on them a lot quicker than anyone else I've met outside of my clan. If you want, I could teach you a few things. Your foundations are a bit unorthodox, I'm guessing from learning through observation and recreation, but they're solid. And I've seen some of the seals you've placed around your and Obito's apartment. That's pretty high-level stuff. To her surprise, Kakashi ducks his head a little, flustered. Thank you for saying so, but those are just crude copies from my own home and modified from some of Minato-sensei's old scrolls. Kushina wants to squeal and coo at him because Kakashi is being all shy and humble, and it's the cutest thing she's ever seen. She doesn't get her answer, unfortunately, because just then the voices in the other room raise above civil speaking level, and moments later, Mikoto appears with an apologetic look. Kushina, I think it's time for us to go, she says. Thank you so much for dinner. It was lovely, as usual. I'm sorry we have to miss dessert. Kushina frowns but nods. It's alright, probably for the best. Next week, same time, same place? Mikoto nods, smiling in that beautiful, demure way that Kushina used to envy. Of course. She disappears and soon Kushina can't feel her calm chakra or Fugaku's cold, solid presence. She doesn't know if she's more relieved or disappointed. I'm assuming dinners have been like this for a while? Kakashi asks slightly, sounding more concerned for her than actually curious. Kushina's shoulders drop. Yeah? About 6 years, give or take. She growls, frustrated, eyes stinging with the threat of angry tears, and the room fills with glowing red privacy seals thoughtlessly. This is so unfair. Why does Mikoto have to put up with this? First she practically loses both her sons within a year, and now her bastard of a husband can't even get his head out of his own ass and help her through it. Sometimes I can't stand seeing them together because she looks so sad next to him. Why does she have to put up with it? She doesn't deserve this. She doesn't realize she's crying until Kakashi is there in front of her with a handkerchief. I'm sorry, There's nothing to apologize for, Kakashi says evenly, no judgment in his tone as she wipes her face. It's a terrible situation for everyone. Later, Kushina will be thankful he doesn't take her side in berating Fugaku. Later, she will be grateful he didn't fill her head with platitudes and agreements. Later, she will see what Kakashi sees: a broken man doing his best, even if his best isn't enough to help his wife. For now, though, she just wants to forget the look on her best friend's face, like she's losing the will to live. Jiraiya leans back against the couch cushions, muscles finally releasing the slightest bit of tension that had coiled there for the majority of the night, and taps the arm of the chair exactly 3 times. Light races across the floor before dimming just as quickly. He leans surreptitiously to the side. Am I the only one that got the feeling our little Kakashi really doesn't like Fugaku? Rin takes a quick glance at her teammate who is currently being accosted by Kushina and Minato over dishwashing duty in the kitchen, bites her lip, and nods carefully. Kakashi's usually mild attitude had taken a surprising turn to cold at the first sight of Uchiha Fugaku, though she hadn't noticed until halfway through dinner. She's sure Fugaku-sama's callous words did nothing to help the mutual distrust between them shrink whatsoever. Obito looks at him like he's an idiot but drops his voice anyway. You think? Jiraiya scowls at the impudent brat. It was kind of hard to tell after that little spectacle you pulled towards the end. Obito colors, but he can't exactly dispute it. He was being rude to Rin. Rin sighs. I can deal with a cold shoulder, Obito. Jiraiya doesn't say more, interrupted by Tsunade's sharp look. Shut up, both of you. Regarding Hitaki, the feeling is certainly mutual on Fugaku's part. Obito glances down guiltily, grim and knowing with understanding, and Jiraiya is proud and sad to see his students' team grow up so well. Fugaku-sama is a lot better now, especially after what happened to Shursui and then the thing with Itachi and Sasuke, but the clan as a whole is still really protective of the Sharingan. He shakes his head, dismayed and subdued. A non-Uchiha coming back with one? Especially during a war? I wouldn't be surprised if they demanded his head. Rin's lips thin, but she doesn't dispute it. Uchiha or not, they all understand how highly Kekkei Genkais are coveted and protected. Kakashi-kun. Obito's expression pinches with confusion. But that can't be it, can it? I get maybe not getting along, especially after the crap he said in the beginning, but Kakashi's wouldn't hold a grudge over something like that. It sucks, but clan politics and stuff he'd get it, you know, and Jiraiya does know. He knows, almost better than Minato, how Kakashi viewed himself when he was a child, how hard it is to live with an unbearable burden, especially one that another Obito had unwittingly, or knowingly, given him. He wouldn't be surprised if young Kakashi, barely on the cusp of adulthood, willingly became a lamb for slaughter if he thought it was for the good of the village, if he believed his role as a tool for the Hokage was done. If the Uchiha wanted him blinded or dead, Kakashi would does understand and accept it because it's for the good of the village. He eyes the silver-haired genius speculatively as Rin and Obito quietly converse, wondering just how much the rigid, angry boy he knew changed, chest tightening the slightest bit because by the Shodai Kakashi looks just like his father, wild hair and strong jaw and tall build all from Tsukumo. He thought he'd gotten over the resemblance during the council meeting, but it still throws him how much of his old friend he sees. The sight of him brings back regrets he thought he was so good at burying. Tsunade flicks him gently in the thigh, and gently for her means he'll wake up tomorrow with a massive bruise covering most of his upper leg. But it does the trick and draws him out of his unwitting melancholy just as the Namikes drag Kakashi back with some tea and mochi. No one mentions Kushina's slightly red-rimmed eyes or when Kakashi, like last time, chooses the armchair furthest from reach. They all settle, talking mindlessly of missions and current projects around the village, and Jiraiya doesn't miss the quicksilver looks of content and heartbreak that dart across the silver-haired Jounin's face. If you want to know something, you can just ask, Kakashi says mildly during a quiet lull in conversation, teacup mysteriously empty in his hands. Kushina blinks when everyone turns to her and her face colors as bright as her hair, hiding behind her teacup guiltily. Aito and Rin's glances, while noticeable, were not as overt as her long stare and Minato sighs at his wife's antics. Jiraiya smirks, knowing Kushina noticed a seal being activated in her living room and subtly changed it for her own purposes. Her curiosity probably stems from their conversation about Uchiha Fugaku and why Kakashi and the clan head seem to be on bad terms. It never ceases to amaze him what Uzumaki's can do. Jiraiya is the one to reply with a shameless grin, should have known you'd have Tsukumo's freakishly good senses. Not even my sound barrier could block out everything, huh? Kakashi hums noncommittally, not necessarily. Lip reading isn't difficult, and Kushina thinks she's better at hiding her reactions than she is when she's listening in on something she shouldn't. Kushina sticks his tongue out at him but doesn't refute it, and though none of them exactly know how Kakashi knew what they were saying with Obito's back turned to the kitchen, they are astute enough to realize that his mind works on a different level. Tsunade shifts, arms crossed under her considerable bust, and though she says nothing and shows no remorse for their secretive discussion, the Toad Sage can see she is, if even slightly, impressed. Alright kid, I'll just ask then. Jiraiya prompts, leaning forward with a curious spark in his eye, but something foreboding warns him he won't like what he hears. What's going on with you and Fugaku? I didn't hide that very well, did I? Kakashi asks, a note of black humor in his tone. Jiraiya's grin is shark-like. I don't think you even tried to. He shrugs. I get it, he's hard to deal with on a good day. Did he order or death or something after Obito gave you that eye? Minato stiffens beside him but doesn't interrupt. Tsukumo's son looks at him then, really looks at him like he's actually seeing him and not a ghost of his imagination like he'd been doing the entire dinner whenever Jiraiya had dragged him into a conversation. Lone gray eye piercing with a gaze that is far too old for even a shinobi thrown into war so young. His finger taps the teacup absent-mindedly, but the Sannin is slowly learning that nothing Kakashi does is absent-minded. His words are measured, no. Fugaku-sen was the one to calm his clan. He believed that, as it was Obito's final wish, I should keep the Sharingan, and for that I am grateful to him. He's sincere, but Jiraiya is sure no one misses the lack of deference given to Fugaku or his title. Rin starts, then why? Why she waves a hand, unable to explain. Because it's not outright hostility, but it's not simple dislike. Disappointment would be a better word if it wasn't such a strange idea. Kakashi sighs, I apologize. I haven't made my feelings a secret, and it's unfair of me to judge him for what I blame the Uchiha Fugaku in my world to have failed in. Jiraiya knows there's a lot more to it than that. Kakashi is too good to let them, or Fugaku, know how he feels unless he wants them to know. Minato has never been one to push, believing firmly that unless it was a direct threat to a teammate's safety, prying into another's affairs is unnecessary. Jiraiya knows he sure as hell didn't teach his student that. Well, now you've got me curious. His little blonde student shoots him a warning glare that he ignores. He feels a little bad, of course. It's never in good taste to undermine a person of authority in front of their subordinates, in this case, Obito and Rin, but he has questions that need answers. Minato may trust the brat already, and Jiraiya trusts his student, but the man is nothing like Jiraiya sometimes imagined his friend's son would have been in his drunker, more reminiscent moments. However, Kakashi's vocabulary has evolved from curt insults and reciting the shinobi rulebook since his teen years. It seems you'll have to stay curious for a while longer, he says dryly. He says it lightly, but there's steel infused in his words, inflexible. The same steel and unbendable will that he's always had lacing his spine even at such a young age, and Jiraiya knows nothing he can do will make him talk. It's frustrating, but it makes him absurdly proud as well, and he can almost see why Minato trusts him so much so quickly. But those aren't the only things he needs to know about. Hopefully not too long, kid. Jiraiya says in acquiescence, gracefully backing out of what was gearing up to be an interrogation. There's a lot to discuss. Obito and Rin shoot each other furtive looks and Minato doesn't object like he half expects. It only confirms his suspicions, though, that his student and his students know far more than they are saying now. But like Minato said earlier, it's Kakashi's story to tell, and so Jiraiya will wait even with Tsunade's burning gaze boring into him. Itachi stirs long before the masked man arrives, and when he senses two eyes, one gray and one red, burning into him, it's with a vague sense of understanding that it's because the man wants to be found. He's heard rumors, of course, of the Yondame's protege walking among them again after more than 15 long years of being dead, killed saving a comrade in a disturbing reflection of his father's sacrifice. Itachi had been asked as a favor for the yondaime to secretly play bodyguard among the stationed ANBU for the unconscious Jounin, proclaimed a child genius, the youngest to join the ranks of shinobi and no stranger to war, but beyond the man's ability to sneak out of the hospital undetected and bypass his own carefully set traps around the greenhouse, Itachi has no interest in him whatsoever. He greets him out of courtesy, doesn't stop watering a row of beautifully flourishing echinacea even as he keeps the other within his senses at all times. Hatake Kakashi-san? The man offers a casual, two-fingered salute, and addresses him more intimately than even his own family these days. Yo, Uchiha-kun. How have you been? For some reason, he is bothered by how unperturbed the man is in his presence. No one dares interrupt him when he is in his greenhouse, not unless there's an absolute emergency, because this is his space to think and breathe in peace, and he is sure this supposed genius has done his research and knows this well. Well-practiced hands gently pry the withered leaves of one of his herb bushes even with Itachi's sharp gaze on him, but he can wait until Itachi is done with his task. A pale hand delicately traces over the timekeeping piece given to him by his older cousin and notices it is midday already. Where has the time gone? I'm fine, Hatake-san. And yourself? What does it feel like to be a dead man walking? Fine. Sure is a beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect for taking care of a garden as diverse as this. Hataki's tone is conversationally, almost bored, when he says this, not particularly inviting but not hostile. A twig snaps 20 feet to Itachi's right. Betulina barasma. Very rare, only found on the harsh, rocky surfaces of Lightning Country's mountain ranges, right? Impressive. So he's already broken into my files and read my old mission reports. That particular mission is highly classified and supposedly under heavy guard, restricted to everyone but the Hokage and his closest advisors. Thank you? Itachi intones, politeness flatlining into apathy. Shouldn't you be preparing for your match tomorrow? Probably, Hatake shrugs. It's hard to believe that this man was once the frontrunner of his generation, a dangerous shinobi and legend in the making who would one day surpass his once great father, when he stands at a slouch and scuffy Jounin blues with an apathetic air about him. But Itachi doesn't miss the subtle grace in his movements, or the underscore of steel in his voice beneath the lackadaisical attitude. It makes his skin prickle with unease. Itachi has done his research too, read in a cursory file that, even as a child, Hataki's mind was as sharp as a Naruto's with senses as good as an Inuzuka tracker, is calm in almost any situation with incredible analytical skills and strategic ability. Traits that would flourish under the yondaime's tutelage and years of experience as guidance. Traits that would easily make him a Hokage candidate in the future, if he was so inclined, if he wasn't actually dead. With this knowledge, Itachi knows he would not be approached if the Hatake didn't want something, and under normal circumstances, Itachi would not mind a spar to gauge the man's skills for himself even in his retirement. However, he is tired. He's always tired these days, and he doesn't want a spar, verbal or otherwise, when there are more important things to be doing, gardening and training and studying and planning, because praying to a being he doesn't believe in won't bring back his brother. Itachi is done with games. Is there something you needed, Hatake-san? Hataki's head tilts to the side and deliberately ignores his question with one of his own. Why a greenskeeper? Itachi moves on to his next plant and purposefully sets off one of his simpler traps. Kunai and shuriken fly out with deadly accuracy, but he doesn't hear the sound of metal meeting flesh. How unfortunate. Now that wasn't very nice, Hatake admonishes, but he sounds amused. Itachi doesn't break his stride to the vines climbing the southern wall of his greenhouse. The war is over. We are at peace. Why kill when I can grow? Better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Hatake recites easily, a note of solemnity touching his words, and Itachi stills, hand hovering over another taut wire hidden among the leaves. An old proverb I'm sure you know. An apt one in your case. Itachi is done with games. What do you want, Hatake-san? Itachi assumes the man is no longer smiling, but it's hard to tell with the artificial lights casting harsh shadows across the man's blurry, masked face. You know, we may be at peace for now, but war will always come whether or not we want it. We must be prepared for that possibility. Itachi thinks of child soldiers and bloody battlefields, of too many bodies to burn and funerals to count, the rivers of blood that choke the earth and oceans of tears that drown the living. He doesn't attack despite the sudden sensation of dread that disrupts the apathy that has lived in his bones for years. He doesn't attack, but it's a near thing. Instead, he fully faces the stranger that does not belong in this world, mind whirring with carefully hidden alarm. That sounds much like something some of the council members would say. Finally, the infuriating, faint edge of bored indifference in Hataki's demeanor dissipates with something sharper taking its place. Acknowledgement. Awareness. Yes, it does, doesn't it? The man looks away, in the direction of Itachi's haunting willow tree, but the Uchiha can tell he is not really seeing it, and a sense of foreboding chills his blood when that old, broken gaze returns to him after a long moment. Unlike certain council members, Uchiha-kun, I've had my fill of war and death and do not hunger for more, Hatake reveals gravely, eyes still far away and boring into Itachi all the same with bare honesty, words heavy with promise and ringing of prophecy. And unlike certain council members, I know war is coming, and I want to stop it if I can. The man disappears in a swirl of leaves. Kakashi doesn't really know why he visits. He's going to be late meeting Aito and Rin at their old training grounds at this rate, but he just needs to satisfy his curiosity. His apartment, the one he moved into soon after his father's death, the one he paid for with his own money saved up from dozens of D ranks and kept for years and years after despite being so small, because even though it never really felt like home, it was his is most likely occupied by now, if not demolished altogether. But he goes anyway, because he has to know if the whip's smart old landlady with a silver tongue and wily spirit is doing okay. Being a civilian wife of a shinobi is a hard, stressful life, and even as closed off to the world as he was as a child, Kakashi could see her struggle through the haggard lines on her face and the bow in her back after her husband's death. But Tanabe Hiromi is strong in the way civilians of shinobi villages tend to be, stubborn and determined to forge on in life with her memories only helping her move forward. And Kakashi remembers admiring that trait when he at one time felt like he would collapse under the weight of the village's expectations, lose himself in the shadows of his father's legacy. She, unlike many others, didn't turn him away when he came looking for a new home, a new start. She merely looked at him with her sharp eyes surrounded by crow's feet, and told him rent was due the 3rd of every month, no exceptions. He became something like her personal handyman after that, one of the only shinobi to live in her complex, and in return she would give him leftovers of whatever recipe she tried that week. Theirs was a strange relationship, unlike most normal landladies and tenants, and certainly closer than most even if it wasn't obvious. She constantly sniped about his height, and he snapped at her about her terrible cooking. She berated him for his poor social life, and he turned his nose up at whatever sweets she tried to force-feed him. She never mentioned the bloody trails leading to his apartment after a long mission, or the bandages she left on his doorstep, and he never forgot to bring her flowers on her birthday and remind her that she was still too young to complain about a bad back. Her funeral was a small thing, a week after she died protecting children from Suna shinobi during the invasion of the Chunin exams. Ha, look at that! Your brats aren't half bad, shrimp. Maybe you'll make shinobi out of them yet. Few attended as she was survived by none and there were already so many funerals, but those who did come shed more tears for her than followers of royalty, beloved students and close friends from years past, mothers and fathers thanking her for saving their children, and one lone scarecrow watching it all in the distance. I'm losing my touch, he muses when the door opens before he can knock, pulling him out of his thoughts when familiar, piercing eyes look him up and down suspiciously. He finds he's without words. She doesn't bat an eye at his appearance or his silence, though, and gruffly accuses after a long moment, "You're late on your rent, brat." He blinks down at her in surprise. Hiromi's eyes are even narrower than he remembers, more wrinkles aging her face, voice rougher and more grating than before as a result of 4 decades as a teacher screaming at her students to sit down and shut up, eventually catching up with her added with her penchant for dressing down disrespectful civilians and shinobi alike. For a moment, he thinks she doesn't really remember him, except he knows he didn't imagine seeing a flash of blush pink on his grave marker, a single T-rose set below his engraved name. I will remember always. He dips his head with a smile. Ah, sorry. Dying tends to do that. The woman huffs when he holds out her favorite flowers in apology, but he can see the reluctant smile make its way onto her face, making her seem 20 years younger all at once. She ushers him inside for tea and whatever concoction she's cooked up that day, a lemon something that he's pretty sure isn't supposed to be that shade of green, and politely pretends he can't see the beginnings of tears she gruffly wipes away as she points to the kitchen. Well, the least you can do is make yourself useful, brat. That faucet's been leaking for 18 years. That was a stupid move. Too late to take it back though. Confronting Itachi had been the original plan, after he tossed out assassination too high profile, and he's not even sure he could kill Itachi at this point, retired or not, but he hadn't meant to reveal so much so soon. Even after mentally preparing himself for days, seeing Sasuke's older brother again had still been an uncomfortable shock. He hadn't been able to see past those unfathomable eyes, couldn't help but imagine the other wearing a black robe colored with red clouds instead of a simple gardening kimono. His hands had been in his pockets for a majority of their interaction, trembling, because the vivid nightmare of his former teammate carrying out the massacre of an entire clan will always be burned into his memories. But he had to do something, even if it was something as crazy as tentatively reaching out to a veritable mass murderer and potential missing Nin. It's worked for Naruto so far, right? Guess I'll have to play it by ear, the clone mutters quietly to himself, transformed into a large tree branch just outside the boundaries of the academy as his target moves among the school children with disgusting ease. After all, he has a lot of people to keep an eye on, including a possible traitor. Rin? She ignores the sound of her name called tentatively, arms full of medical reports and mind set on not causing a scene in the middle of a busy hospital hallway. Rin, come on. Talk to me. Her mouth is moving before she consciously realizes it. Why talk when I have nothing to say to you? It's said with more vitriol than she anticipates, but it serves to quiet the person attempting to get her attention for a minute. A quiet, Rin, please. Jaw clenched, Rin calls an intern over to her and orders them to sort her stack of files while she's busy. The poor kid practically wets himself at her intensity, but she can't think to feel sorry about it as she grabs her follower's arm in a rough grip and drags her into an empty room with privacy seals. They activate with her wordless command, and she turns to glare at her friend. What do you want, Shizen? If you can't tell, we're kind of busy today and Kakashi's match is in a few hours. Shizen draws back, hurt, and Rin softens without meaning to. Rin, look, I know I made a mistake. The softness disappears abruptly, and she sees red. You falsified Kakashi's medical documents, Shizen. I know. I thought. You thought what, Shizen? That I wouldn't notice critical tenketsu points being blocked? That I'd somehow missed the hairline stress fractures in his spinal cord and weakened tendons? All injuries that should have been documented and treated while I was on leave? She'd listened to Shizen's concerns about Kakashi just days ago when she confronted her about Kakashi's injuries, watched her talk about the potential threat he poses even if he himself isn't aware, and she'd been angry then, but lying about his health? Allowing his body to stay in that condition? Purposefully keeping it from her? She doesn't understand why her friend would do such a thing, and the confusion only makes the horrified rage burn that much hotter. I was here when they brought him in. He was in pretty rough shape. Rin knows. She read the reports. Several times. Like usual, Shizen reads her easily. That file doesn't have everything, Rin. You're right, I left some things out. Rin didn't know that. Shizen takes a deep breath, and Rin can almost see the walls building up, calm mask carefully constructing itself over her friend's face in front of her very eyes. She's only seen it a few times and very rarely has it been directed against her. It makes her fingers twitch for a piece of gauze. In less than a few moments, she's no longer looking at Shizen, her friend. She's looking at the calm, cool visage of Tsunade's first apprentice. Her eyes widen, never leaving Shizen's hard gaze. Why? I didn't want you to worry more than you are now. Shizen holds a hand up placatingly to stifle Rin's building outrage. I'm just saying, he isn't the same person you know. He's been through some terrible things, more so than your average shinobi, and I don't want him to hurt you again. I haven't heard anything about his evaluation with Ibiki-san yet, so I can't really judge his mental state, but Rin, you know as well as I do that even with proper healing, there will always be signs and scars left. His body has been through a lot, and usually people who go through that kind of torture. Rin knows there's more she should hear, but she can't listen to the rest without doing she may regret later. Shizen doesn't say anything to those claims, defensive or otherwise, actually starts to pale in horror, and Rin doesn't even know who she's talking to anymore. A horrible realization worms its way into her mind when she thinks back on the thorough physical she'd done while Kakashi was still unconscious just before her leave, how she left her teammate in Shizen's care because she was running herself ragged, and she chokes out, "Did you do that to him?" Shizen starts, looking almost panicked now, nothing like the collected medic she is. We had to keep him contained, Rin, I had no choice. When they tried to do diagnostics on him, he incapacitated 3 of my trained medics and 2 other chunin before Guy managed to tie him down to the bed. By then, his 3 cracked ribs had completely broken, and his concussion had gotten worse. It was for the safety of the staff and him. The excuses are weak and Shizen knows it. We have protocol for that, Shizen. What the hell made you think? A senior medic, Hayoshi, came to me with concerns about Kakashi-san's security. He had full belief in Hokage-sama seals, but he was worried about any physical restraints because the seals keep him from escaping or molding chakra, not fighting. So we sealed a few tenketsu points to keep him more or less sedated. Rin feels like she's stepped into a twilight zone. You crippled a man, Shizen. It's a miracle he didn't permanently damage something sparring Guy. Why would you? That goes directly against our oath as medical professionals. Do no harm. Why? Why? Shizen looks so lost when she whispers, I don't know. Rin's lips thin. I didn't say anything to Tsunade-sama before but this. Rin, I swear, I don't know why I did it. I thought it was the right thing to do then, but now Shizen stops, hands trembling and looking truly remorseful, almost terrified. Rin doesn't know what to believe. Yamanaka-kun. Yamanaka-ryu stops in his tracks, mind racing to place the voice, and is too late to run when a gloved hand lands on his shoulder in a visibly friendly pat with invisibly controlled strength. He turns, brittle and polite when he greets, Hataki-san. Nice to see you again. Lie. The man's masked smile was unnerving the first time he saw it, little less than 2 weeks ago. It still is now. Same to you? Busy? No. Actually, I'm free? Good, good. Don't you have? Don't worry. I have a few hours to spare. Let's get dango, my treat. Ryu understands an order when he hears one, the thready echo of an ANBU captain's commanding tone ringing in those innocuous words, and he doesn't protest when the older jounin leads him to a dango shop down the street where it's less crowded and far more private. They end up taking a table half hidden by a giant cardboard cutout displaying some advertisement, and his mouth twists in a half grimace when instead of dango like he expects, Hataki orders a plate of pork dumplings and a special blend of tea meant for soothing headaches. It's his usual order. Thank you, he says stiltedly. He knows the side effects of the jutsu he'd used as well as Hataki apparently does. Looking into someone's mind using that technique is like flashing a powerful light into a mirror. No one knows what will be reflected besides the desired memories. And with Hataki's Sharingan, the effects are even more uncertain. The horrifying part, though, is he can't tell if the man knows his preferences through those side effects or close scrutiny. No problem, Hataki replies easily, picking up a stick of dango he'd ordered for himself, even though Ryu knows quite well the man despises most sweets. A hard-working young man like you deserves a break from all those nasty root interrogations, and working for Ibiki certainly is no picnic. Ryu's eyes dart up to Hitachi's expressionless face in alarm, hand already halfway to his kunai pouch. His hand is stopped by one of those very same dango sticks piercing his shirt sleeve and anchoring him to the tabletop. The crackle of lightning distinct and threatening. It disappears into the air, and in seconds it's just a regular, if charred, dango stick again. Ryu lowers his voice, and he can very well hear the threat in his own words when he asks, "What do you think you're doing?" However, he's fairly sure he, a Tokubetsu Jounin, can't beat Hitaki, his senior by 4 years and a certified prodigy, in a fight, so he doesn't know why he thinks feigning force will get him any answers, especially with the way Hitaki's posture never changes from a relaxed slouch. And he doesn't think he wants to know what the man is thinking, in all honesty. The memories that still stubbornly cling to the fringes of his mind are enough to give him new nightmares on top of his own, and he knows whatever Hitaki's about to say will do the opposite of soothe them. Easy there. Just having a casual conversation with good company in nice weather. Is that so much to ask for? Hitaki sighs, picking up another stick of dango. Besides, I already have a genjutsu up. Anyone bothering to listen will think I'm asking about my evaluation with Ibiki. They think you're gushing about your kid to get out of answering my questions, by the way. He knows about Kochan. How many memories did he see? Ryu relaxes his rigid posture and pulls the stick out of his shirt, but he doesn't move his hand farther than 6 inches from his weapon's pouch. Then what do you really want to ask about? Have you met a root member that goes by the codename Kino? Kino. Nothing about Hitaki's demeanor outwardly changes, but Ryu knows that Kino is somehow important. No, Hitaki hums, twirling his second mysteriously empty dango stick casually between his gloved fingers. It's a simple piece of wood, but now Ryu knows how deadly it is in his hands. I'm not sure I believe you, Yamanaka-kun. Blue eyes narrow. Maybe you're not asking the right questions, Hitaki-san. And maybe I have some of my own. I see. Well then, how about this? A question for a question. Ryu doesn't know why he's even entertaining this man any longer than he has to, but he sees one swirling red eye in the back of his mind, one that sends a shiver of icy fear down his back. This eye, he knows, is not the same one borrowed by Hitaki. Fine, wonderful. Who is Danzu in your world? The vague amusement in Hitaki's demeanor abruptly vanishes. Straight to the point, I see. From what I've gathered, he seems to be remarkably similar to the one I know. Former teammate of Sarutobi Hiruzen, Hokage advisor and council member. Although, it seems Minato-sensei has a new set of advisors. That's it. Maybe you're not asking the right questions, is Hitaki's cheerful reply. Ryu can feel his left eye twitch irritably. Hitaki leans back in his seat, mulling over his next question. Now, have you ever heard of, spoken to, interrogated, read a file on, and or interacted with a possible member of Root or ANBU or both in the last 10 years who is capable of using Mokuton? Ryu narrows his eyes suspiciously and answers honestly, yes. Why do you hate Danzu? Why don't I hate Danzu? The blonde has to bite back a smile at that but outwardly scowls. Fine. He is a power-hungry warmonger and has visions of a Konoha I will never support. That is certainly a bold statement to make, so candid and out in the open in the heart of the village even under the cover of a genjutsu. It's that boldness that allows Ryu to admit, well, we have something in common then. Who is Tobi? Hitaki regards him with a long, measuring look before saying with startling severity. A very dangerous S-ranked missing nin who I hope you never meet. Ryu feels the hairs on his arms stand on end, both from the charged air coming from Hitaki and the warning in his words. He swallows. I'll keep that in mind. Your turn. The atmosphere lightens. When and where did you hear of, speak to, interrogate, read a file on, or interact with this possible member of Root or ANBU or both? This man is utterly ridiculous and possible bipolar, but he's thorough and Ryu knows he brought this on himself. 6 months ago, just before the border of the Land of Sound, Valley of the End, Hitaki murmurs. Is that important? Ryu asks, more out of habit than interest. Then he winces. Hitaki hides his smugness well. Not sure yet. Last question. When was Otogekyo founded? Ryu's brows furrow. Why ask something so easily found in textbooks? And why Oto? Shortly after Yandame-sama's inauguration. Why is your Sharingan sometimes different? So you did see it, Hitaki says, measured. Ryu leans forward, urgency rushing through his blood with the implied confirmation. I know the Uchiha have secrets surrounding their Dijutsu, as does pretty much every clan about their Kekkei Genkais, but I've seen a Sharingan transform like that only once before. What does yours do? Hitaki watches him carefully for a long moment, as if weighing his worth and determining how much truth he should divulge. He sounds reluctant when he eventually reveals, I shouldn't say, even if it is technically public information, but at the rate things are going, it will come out sooner or later. Ryu doesn't comment on the strange remark. It's the second level of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Mangekyo Sharingan. I've heard of that before. But where? It's a very powerful stage of the Dijutsu that few can access. Mine in particular is related to space manipulation, but even I am not completely aware of the full range of its powers. Ryu leans back in his seat, feeling just the slightest bit overwhelmed. And since those were 2 questions, I get to save one for another time, Hataki cheerfully announces. Before Ryu can protest, Hataki looks at his non-existent watch in mock surprise. Well, look at the time. I'll see you later, great talk. The masked nin gives him a 2-fingered salute and disappears in a poof of smoke. Ryu can feel a headache coming on as he takes another sip of his tea, now cold. Note to self, prolonged contact with Hataki will lead to migraines. But I suppose he's not a bad guy. Ryu smiles politely when the waitress comes over to drop off the bill. But as soon as he looks at it, he blinks dumbly at the receipt, a lengthy one that comprises of his pork dumplings and tea, Hataki's dango and a round of sweets and sake for everyone in the establishment. His left eye twitches. That bastard.